Yes. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I'm pleased to welcome you all to the 16th session of the United Nations Forum on Forest, and I call to order its first virtual informal meeting. The forum will hold its meetings using remote simultaneous interpretation. I kindly ask participants to be mindful of the additional difficulties experienced by interpreters when working remotely, and so to deliver statements at a normal speaking speed. I apologize in advance for any technical difficulties that we may encounter during our virtual meetings. I now invite the forum to turn to item 1 of its agenda, election of officers, for its 16th session. Delegations will recall that pursuant to Council Decisions 2020/205, 2020/206, and 2020/219, the forum, upon the recommendation of the chair of its 15th session, through a silence procedure that expired without objection on the 2nd of July 2020, elected me as chair and Mr. Javad Momeni of the Islamic Republic of Iran and Mr. Jesse Mahoney of Australia as vice chairs of the 16th and 17th sessions of the forum. Delegations will also recall that pursuant to Council Decision 2021/213 of 24th of February 2021, the forum, on my recommendation, through a silence procedure that expired without objection on the 14th of April 2021, adopted an oral decision under item 1, election of officers, to elect Mr. Musa Abujwam of Ghana and Mr. Tomasz Markiewicz of Poland as vice chairs of the forum at its 16th and 17th session, as well as to appoint the vice chair, Mr. Javad Momeni of the Islamic Republic of Iran, to serve concurrently as a rapporteur of the 16th and 17th sessions. I would like to warmly congratulate the newly elected members of the Bureau and to acknowledge their participation in the preparations for this session of the forum since their nomination, and they will, in the coming days, assist with the chairing of our meetings. I now invite the forum to turn its attention to item 2, adoption of the agenda and other organizational matters. As delegations will recall, through a silence procedure, also pursuant to Council Decision 2021/213 of 24th of February 2021, that expired without objection on the 14th of April 2021, the following procedural decisions under item 2 of the provisional agenda were adopted. 1, the oral draft decision to adopt the provisional agenda of UNFF 16 as contained in document E/CN.18/2021/1. And second, the oral draft decision to adopt the provisional organization of work of UNFF 16, taking into account the modality as circulated in my letter of February 3rd, 2021. In view of the need to consider and address the tasks contained in the agenda and the organization of work, I propose to take a flexible approach in ensuring the maximum use of our time and to adjust the work program depending on the needs that may arise during the week. A concise chair's summary of the highlights of the discussions during this session will be shared with you towards the end of the week, with a view to receiving your comments and factual corrections, if any, within 1 week following the conclusion of the forum. The chair's summary will also include a summary of relevant discussions of the forum during this session, which will serve as an input to the 2021 High-Level Political Forum on Sustainable Development under the auspices of the Economic and Social Council. As was the practice in the past, side events are scheduled to be held following the conclusion of daily meetings of the forum, as our lunch break only lasts 15 minutes. The list of side events is available on the webpage of the 16th session of the forum on the UNFF website. Last but not least, in order to ensure that you receive all correspondence relating to our work, please make sure to send your contact information to the Secretariat, email address unff@un.org, as well as request access to the UNFF UNFF pages of the e-delegate portal through the system administrator in your respective missions. At this stage, I also wish to inform members that I will be circulating a letter today placing the agreed draft resolution on the program of work of the United Nations Forum on Forest for 2022 through 2024, the provisional agenda for the 17th session of the forum, and the draft decision on the dates and venue for the 17th session of the forum under silence procedure pursuant to Council Decision 2021/213 and the Bureau recommended modalities that were agreed for this session. Therefore, these decisions and their corresponding agenda items on the organization of work will take place by correspondence and will not be considered during the virtual informal meetings. Distinguished delegates, I now invite the forum to turn to agenda item 5, emerging issues, impacts of the coronavirus disease, COVID-19 pandemic, on forests and the forest sector. It is now my honor to give the floor to the officer in charge of the United Nations Forum on Forests Secretariat, Mr. Alexander Trepelkov, to introduce the note by the Secretariat under the item as contained in document E/CN.18/2021/7. Mr. Trepelkov, it is my honor to give you the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Can you hear me?
Okay. I can hear you.
Thank you.
Please proceed.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the UN Department of Economic and Social Affairs, I have the honor to introduce the note by the Secretariat on the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on forests and the forest sector. The COVID-19 pandemic has disrupted human life, livelihoods, and economies at an unprecedented scale. Never before in the UN history have we experienced global calamities on so many levels at the same time. The UN Forum on Forests was one of the first intergovernmental bodies to take concrete steps to assess the impact of COVID-19 on forests. In June 2020, the 15th session of the forum requested the UNFF Secretariat to compile an initial assessment of the impact of the pandemic on forests and the forest sector, and to present this assessment for your consideration. Recognizing that the impact of the pandemic would vary depending on the regional context, the initial assessment was carried out through regional studies. These studies gathered information and relevant data from countries, relevant organizations, and stakeholders, and are available in their entirety on the UNFF 16 webpage. In addition, the UNFF Secretariat, as part of its intersessional activities, facilitated discussions on the impacts of the pandemic on forests through analytical papers, policy briefs, and participation in intergovernmental meetings, webinars, and other virtual events. The note by the Secretariat provides an overview of the key findings from the initial assessment and the intersessional activities, and it includes the following 5 points. First point, globally, the pandemic has aggravated hardships among forest-dependent people from several perspectives. These include job losses, reduced income, decreased remittances from migrant family members, reduced access to markets and information, increased physical isolation, a lack of health assistance, and disruption to government assistance programs. The pandemic has resulted in decreased income and revenues, lower investments, and increased costs for forest companies, especially small and medium-sized enterprises. it has also had a negative impact on the production of non-fiber forest products as a main source of income and food for local communities. Second point, sustainable forest management can make significant contributions to offset many of the social, economic, and environmental impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. Forests are vital to addressing many pandemic-induced challenges, including economic recession, increased poverty, and widening inequalities. As we build our path to recovery, forest-based solutions should be integrated into post-pandemic green recovery strategies, fiscal stimulus packages, and action plans. Third point, to support sustainable forest management at all levels, we must renew our commitment to the internationally agreed forest-related goals and targets and accelerate their implementation. The UN Strategic Plan for Forests 2030, which is fully aligned with the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, provides a universal framework to guide our immediate crisis response and recovery efforts and longer-term transformation for sustainability. Fourth point, the devastating impacts of the pandemic in all countries and across all regions have exposed systemic gaps and vulnerabilities. COVID-19 has been a harsh wake-up call that systemic changes are needed to better manage the risk of future pandemics. As we focus on recovery and building resilience, we have a unique opportunity to promote the role of forests as nature-based solutions to global challenges, including climate change, water scarcity, and biodiversity loss. We need to send a clear message that tackling the drivers of deforestation and forest degradation is essential for a greener, more inclusive, and sustainable future for all. Fifth point, the level of our post-pandemic ambition must be matched by adequate resources for forests from all sources and at all levels. At the international level, the role of official financial flows to forestry, in particular ODA, is now more important than ever, along with capacity development, technology transfer, and multi-stakeholder partnerships. Ladies and gentlemen, 4 years ago, this forum had the foresight to chart a clear path for a better future for the world's forests and people through the UN Strategic Plan for Forests 2030 with its global forest goals. Sustainable and healthy forest ecosystems and resilient forest-dependent communities are major pillars of the global sustainable development. As marginalized and vulnerable forest-dependent communities increasingly turn to forests during the current COVID-19 crisis, we must renew our commitment to living in harmony with nature and galvanize greater action for forests and people who depend on them. Thank you.
I thank the officer in charge, Mr. Trefakov, of the Forum Secretariat for his introductory statement on the impact of the pandemic on our work for forest. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I now invite the Forum to hold its high-level roundtable discussion on major forest-related developments. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, as the chair of the 16th session of the United Nations Forum on Forest, I extend to all of you a warm welcome to this high-level roundtable on major forest-related developments. It is my distinct pleasure to moderate this important event. The COVID-19 pandemic has exacerbated systemic risks and challenges of the global economy by aggravating inequalities and poverty around the world and increasing pressure on natural resources and global commons. These adverse effects have reversed many hard-won gains towards the Sustainable Development Goals over the past years. Concurrently, the pandemic has underscored the need for international cooperation, both for immediate response and for longer-term recovery. Additional and accelerated efforts are required to support countries to achieve the internationally agreed development goals and targets, including the Sustainable Development Goals and the Global Forest Goals. We are all aware that forests provide multiple socio-economic and environmental benefits and have immense potential to address global crises. Forests play a critical role in combating climate change. Forests are also home to 80% of global biodiversity in terrestrial ecosystems. Forests and mountains provide 75% of freshwater resources. This high-level roundtable provides an opportunity for all of us to showcase solidarity and promote concerted multilateral actions to overcome the challenges of sustainable forest management and maximize the contribution of forests to addressing the current planetary crises. This event is also an important occasion to voice and demonstrate our collective will, commitments and actions to chart forest-based solutions for a sustainable and inclusive recovery from COVID-19. Against this background, I am now pleased to invite our distinguished speakers from member states and the UN system to share their perspectives on how to make forest a part of the solution to address the current global challenges, in particular, those related to climate change, biodiversity loss, deforestation and land degradation, inequalities and poverty in the post-COVID-19 era. Following the conclusion of the opening segment, there will be an opportunity for participants to engage in interactive discussions. The key points of our discussions will be reflected in the chair's summary of UNFF 16. Thank you. And now I invite the forum to hear an address by the President of the Economic and Social Council, His Excellency Ambassador Munir Akram. Sir, you have the floor.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, it is a great pleasure to join you at the opening of the high-level roundtable of the 16th session of the UN Forum on Forests. This year, we are meeting in the midst of the greatest crisis since the founding of the United Nations. The COVID-19 pandemic has devastated societies and economies. The poorest and most vulnerable countries and peoples have suffered the most. 131 million people will be pushed back into poverty. 400 million jobs have been lost. 34 million people face starvation. And with vaccines available only to some of the rich, the inequality and suffering in the developing world is likely to persist, even as the advanced economies spend trillions to recover from the crisis. The environmental crisis is also impacting the poor and vulnerable the most. 75% of the land surface has been significantly altered globally. Over 85% of wetlands have been lost, and 1 million animal and plant species are threatened with extinction, along with severe environmental degradation. The need to restore equity among humans and harmony with nature has never been so urgent and pressing. The world's priority must be to end poverty and hunger while also safeguarding our planet. We need to support a sustainable, inclusive, and resilient model for global recovery. Reforestation and nature-based solutions will be a central part of such a sustainable development model. Healthy forests sustain human well-being, livelihoods, and survival in both rural and urban communities. They provide essential ecosystem services, including clean water, renewable energy, biological diversity, and climate regulation. Halting and reversing deforestation can also reduce the risks and conditions that lead to the spread of zoonotic diseases. There are successful examples of reforestation. My own country has embarked on a journey of clean and green Pakistan through our Prime Minister's 10 billion tree tsunami and ecosystem restoration plan that includes poverty reduction strategies through the creation of green jobs. Dear colleagues, the high-level political forum on sustainable development in July will reflect on how we can promote a resilient and sustainable recovery from the pandemic that puts us on track to realize the SDGs and to protect people and the planet. I have identified 3 areas for priority action: SDG financing, sustainable infrastructure investment, and science and technology. I am glad that the ECOSOC Forum on Financing for Development has been able to arrive at a far-reaching consensus on measures to facilitate recovery from the current crises through creation of additional liquidity, including SDR creation and reallocation, debt relief, larger concessional financing, and fulfillment of the climate finance commitments made by developed countries. Financing for sustainable forest management must be part of the use of such new liquidity. If the world is to achieve net zero carbon emission by 2050 and restore planetary health, we must transfer to a sustainable and environmental friendly development model. The investment of at least $1 trillion in sustainable infrastructure, energy, transportation, housing is needed annually in developing countries to ensure such a transition. Sustainable agriculture and forest management goes hand in hand with sustainable infrastructure investments. This will provide communities which are dependent on forests with alternative sources of energy than wood and can create millions of green jobs. Therefore, it is essential to clearly identify the areas of scientific and technological breakthroughs required to achieve the global goals. The rapid production of the COVID-19 vaccine is a testament to the ability of science to achieve innovation when the scientific priorities are clearly identified and adequately financed. We should identify the scientific breakthroughs required for sustainable development. Excellencies, technological and digital innovation has a clear role to play in forests, ranging from the use of remote sensing and processing of geospatial data to the use of drone technology, big data, and artificial intelligence in forest inventories and monitoring activities. These technologies, too, must be accessible to all countries. The Economic and Social Council has the mandate and the responsibility to respond to the present challenges and restore the balance with nature in the era of the pandemic, climate, and natural challenges that we face. Those challenges can be addressed only through strengthened international cooperation. I look to your forum to launch a strong call for international solidarity in these times of crisis. I look forward to the contribution of the UN Forum on Forests as we strive to recover and build back better. Thank you.
I thank the President of the Economic and Social Council for his statement and for joining us this morning, and we will certainly heed his call in the coming days. I now invite the President of the 75th session of the General Assembly, His Excellency Volkan Bozkir, to address the forum. Excellency, you have the floor.
Madam Chair, Excellencies, it's a pleasure to join you at the high-level roundtable of the 16th session of the UN Forum on Forests. This discussion is particularly timely. The world is facing wide-ranging global crises that are intrinsically linked to the health and sustainability of our natural environment. COVID-19, a zoonotic disease, has brought some home of the risks associated with our encroachment on the natural world. Species extinction rates are around 100 to 1,000 times higher than the baseline rate, and global warming has seen average temperatures rising by 1.18 degrees Celsius, with 2016 and 2020 tied as the warmest years on record. Clearly, our world is telling us that there is a problem in our relationship with nature. Unfortunately, as a society, we tend to focus on the symptoms and not the underlying conditions, and we have ignored the Earth's messages for far too long. Hopefully, we can help to change that. Colleagues, Excellencies, one of the clearest and easiest steps we can take is to protect our forests. Healthy and sustainable managed forests regulate rainfall patterns and help mitigate the impacts of climate change by acting as carbon sinks, absorbing about 2 billion tons of carbon dioxide annually. They purify our air and water, supply us with food, medicine, and shelter, and are home to incredible biodiversity. Protecting these resources would seem like an obvious solution. We have before us three COP level summits related to the Rio Convention. These dialogues will present us with opportunities to speak directly to policymakers and to help mobilize action. Because while there has long been a need to act, the opportunity to act is now. We have incredible resources pouring into relief and recovery from COVID-19. If we approach this recovery the right way, we can do that better, ensuring that the Sustainable Development Goals and other related global agendas serve as a blueprint for a more resilient world. As President of the General Assembly, I'm pleased to say that we are supporting these efforts by building political momentum through a series of high-level meetings and events. Following on the successful high-level meeting on the water-related goals and targets of the SDGs in March, I will convene a high-level dialogue on desertification, land degradation, and drought on Thursday, May 20, 2021. It is hoped that the dialogue will focus on recovery from the global pandemic and highlight how this can be used to help tackle desertification, land degradation, and drought. There will be strong push around the need to use this momentous recovery effort to create jobs and shovel-ready projects that support land restoration, regenerative agriculture, renewable energy, and energy efficiency, as well as investments in sustainable land management. In addition, the high-level dialogue will help build on past commitments and help maintain momentum on the road to the UN Convention to combat desertification, COP15. Finally, we hope to encourage member states to adopt and implement land degradation neutrality targets and national drought plans in line with the Sendai framework of disaster risk reduction, the nationally determined contributions of the Paris Agreement, and future commitments under the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. Excellency, dear colleagues, 2021 will be a milestone year for the three Rio Conventions on desertification, biodiversity, and climate change. All three of these important issues are linked, and actions taken to address them must be coordinated to ensure that we maximize the impact of our interventions. As we move from the decade to fight desertification into a new decade of ecosystem restoration, let us take this opportunity to renew our commitment to creating a future that is more equitable, where all people benefit from living in harmony with nature. Thank you, and I wish you all the best in your endeavors today.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bozkir, President of the General Assembly, for your statement and also for joining us this morning. I also thank you for your leadership in the work of the General Assembly, as you indeed chart out events that represent that we start listening to what nature is telling us and improve our relationship with nature. Thank you so much. I now invite the Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations, Her Excellency Amina Mohammed, to address the forum. Madam Deputy Secretary General, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency Chair. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, I'm really pleased to join you today. Forests sustain life on the planet, and they perform vital functions such as providing us with clean water. 75% of global freshwater resources come from our forested watersheds, and forests are home to more than 80% of biodiversity on land. Still, each year, 10 million hectares of forests are destroyed, an area that's larger than the United Kingdom. If tropical forest loss was a country, it would be the world's third biggest emitter of carbon dioxide. We face the urgent interlinked threats of climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution that continue to jeopardize the well-being of people on the planet. We have our work cut out for us as we meet in these challenging times. The COVID-19 crisis continues to affect every country and has created major setbacks to our efforts to reduce poverty and deliver sustainable development. Yet, the current crisis also provides us an opportunity to recover better, build a more inclusive and sustainable world, and make peace with nature, using the Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Agreement as our compass. Healthy forests and ecosystems must be at the center of these efforts. They are ready-to-go solutions for green recovery at scale. Looking ahead, I see three important areas for action. First, financing is critical. The global community must fully support countries to unlock investments for forest conservation restoration, especially countries that are severely affected by the aggregated impacts of debt and nature hazards. Instruments like the Debt for Nature swaps are gaining momentum to address the growing debt crisis while securing investments in climate action. The United Nations is also driving innovative cross-cutting financing and action for forest conservation. For example, the Central African Forest Initiative supports governments to deliver SDG-based interventions at the community level. These include sustainable smallholder agriculture, better land use planning, gender equality, and reproductive health, and with national policy improvements. Second, forest conservation and restoration must sustain COVID-19 recovery efforts, especially in rural economies and developing countries, as there are win-wins for stimulus investments. New IMF analysis shows that for every dollar spent in conservation, almost 7 more are generated in the larger economy of the medium term. And every job created in forests generates an additional 1.5 to 2.5 jobs in the wider economy. Third, we must secure ambitious outcomes at the major summits and high-level conferences and events that are happening this year. We are at a make or break moment. 2021 provides us a unique opportunity to halt the rapid loss of biodiversity and ecosystem degradation while addressing the climate emergency and desertification and making our food systems more sustainable with the Sustainable Development Goals as our guide. In this respect, I commend the ambition of countries spearheading the High Ambition Coalition for Nature and People and other initiatives, which aim to secure an ambitious global agreement at COP15 to reverse nature loss. Excellencies, colleagues, forests are at the core of the solutions that can help us make peace with nature. The summits must send an unmistakable signal of ambition and be a power to help change the economics and politics of forest conservation, deforestation, and restoration in many parts of the world. We need all hands on deck, systematic multi-stakeholder dialogue, and across all levels of government, it will be essential to achieve transformation and results at scale. And it is vital that we have the active engagement and support of communities and civil society organizations, including the indigenous peoples and women and girls, who are deeply reliant on forest resources and often lead the way on conservation and restoration. The United Nations Forum on Forests, as the only universal intergovernmental body on forests within the UN system, has a critical role to play. I'm encouraged that all of you leverage the Forum on Forests and other platforms to actively participate in the global movement, which has fostered the UN Decade of Ecosystem Restoration, and that would be launched on World Environment Day on June the 5th. Protecting and restoring forests can support COVID-19 recovery and the achievement of the SDGs, ensuring that 2021 becomes the year where we went from an era of negotiations to a decade of action. Let's make this happen together. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Madam Deputy Secretary General, for your statement and for joining us this morning. We are truly very happy that you are adding your important voice to the call for action now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Following, I now invite the forum to hear a statement by the Director General of the Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations, FAO, Mr. Ku Dongju. And yes, he has the floor.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, healthy forests are key to build back better. At a time of unprecedented climate, health, and economic crisis, forests offers hope to heal the people, environment, and the economy. They provide energy, food security, and income, and function as a safety net in emergencies for many millions of people. Forests store carbon, provide clean water, and home to most of its terrestrial biodiversity. Yet, deforestation and forest degradation continue to have a devastating impact on the environment and on the people's lives. FAO Global Forest Resources Assessment 2020 tells us that the world is losing 10 million hectares of forest each year through the deforestation, mostly due to the expansion of agriculture. Mm-hmm. In addition, land degradation affects almost 2 billion hectares, an area larger than South America. The result is a greater amount of climate warming gases and the irreversible loss of the biodiversity, ultimately impacting people's lives. As we respond to the crisis that beside our planet, forests must play the major role. Fortunately, solutions are at hand. Increasing agricultural production to feed the growing population, halting deforestation are not mutually exclusive. FAO is committed to transforming agri-food system and advancing the UN Secretary General's initiative on turning the tide on deforestation. Increasing investment in forests through the stimulus package can contribute to the economic recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic while providing millions of green jobs. FAO COVID-19 Response and Recovery Program harnesses science, technology, data, human enterprises, and creatives to build back better. Forests and their restoration are integral to this holistic program. We need to work together with all stakeholders, including government, the private sector, local communities, women, youth, as well as indigenous people who manage about 28% of world land faces. Mobilizing global partnership is also vital. For example, the collaborative partnership on forests, which FAO chairs, and a partnership that brings together 15 international organizations works to support the countries in protecting, restoring, and sustainably managing their forests. And FAO co-leads together with the UNEP, the implementation of the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration which will generate the momentum to restore the world forests and contribute to the Sustainable Development Goals. Ladies and gentlemen, our generation must be the one that halts the deforestation, biodiversity loss, and the climate change. Let's make it happen and achieve the better nutrition, better production, a better environment, and a better life. I wish you all a productive and inspirational meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Director General of the FAO. As we know in our work for forest, a very important institution, as a lot of the data that we need to work with comes from that organization. And of course, they have a vantage point addressing both agriculture and having an eye for what happens with our forests. So thank you so much for your contribution. Next, I will give the floor now to the Executive Secretary of the Convention on Biological Diversity, Ms. Elizabeth Maruma Marema, to make her statement. Madam Executive Secretary, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Distinguished Excellencies, high-level speakers who have already spoken before me, distinguished delegates, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. It is my honor to speak to you today. We are living in exceptional times, and we also see the greater challenges that lie ahead of us. However, we can all appreciate that forests are a big part of meeting these challenges. Deforestation, land conversion, degradation, and unsustainable use of forest products push people further into contact with pathogens. Climate change reshapes habitats. Many interacting pressures foster the potential for new channels of transmission and for new diseases to emerge. Protecting, restoring, and sustainably using forests is key to building back better and guarding ourselves against new pandemics. Some important successes have been registered under the UN Strategic Plan for Forests and the Convention's Aichi biodiversity targets. The rate of deforestation is currently lower than the previous decade, and protection of at least 17% of terrestrial areas by 2020 has been achieved for forests. Over 30% of all tropical rainforests, subtropical dry forests, and temperate oceanic forests are now located within protected areas. Despite these bright spots, deforestation is accelerating in places, loss of primary forest continues, and much of what we have retained is fragmented. These pressures worsen climate change and other global crises just at the time when we should be redoubling our efforts. Reversing these trends must be our utmost priority. It is befitting that we have entered the UN decade on ecosystem restoration. Restoration is a crucial component of the portfolio of nature-based solutions available to jointly address climate and biodiversity crises. In 2020, UNEP and FAO with partners have laid the foundation, and we should all make use of this platform for discussion and support on mutual goals, successes, and challenges. This global focus on nature calls upon us to increase our ambition, to help reduce the risk of future pandemics, and to take action on biodiversity loss, climate change, and health. We must build back better and ensure that the recovery programs feature strong environmental safeguards and make full use of the opportunities in the forest sector to put economies back on a greener and more sustainable track. The post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework will set goals to 2050 and targets to 2030. Implementation needs to be strategic. For example, recent analysis found that conserving 30% of land in a strategic location could safeguard around half the world's vulnerable terrestrial carbon stocks and reduce the extinction risk to nearly 9 out of 10 threatened terrestrial species. New research also finds strategic restoration of 30% of converted lands will prevent over 70% of projected extinction of mammals, birds, and amphibians. And therefore, restoring priority lands can also put us on track to sequester almost half of all carbon dioxide increase since the Industrial Revolution. I want to emphasize that none of these actions can be achieved without understanding the socio-economic context and without fully and informed participation of all stakeholders, including indigenous peoples and local communities. They are indispensable allies in the conservation and restoration of the vast areas of our planet. On top of this strategic approach, deep transformative change is required. Our fifth Global Biodiversity Outlook identified 8 sustainable transitions. I will only highlight 2, land and forest, and One Health. Land and forest transition recognizes the essential value of well-conserved habitats and the need to maintain and improve food security without large-scale conversion of forests and other ecosystems. One Health transition recognizes the full range of linkages between biodiversity and human health and addresses common drivers of biodiversity loss, disease risks, and ill health. These pathways are available to us, but we need the impetus, we need courage and support to commit ourselves to them. Dear colleagues, my wish is that we will come out of this crisis stronger and that the new Global Biodiversity Framework will be an integral part of the blueprint for building back better. Perhaps we should add the fourth B, building back better with biodiversity. I wish you productive discussions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Executive Secretary of the Convention on Biological Diversity, for your statement. Indeed, that sounds very correct. A fourth B, biodiversity, as it is so central to the work of maintaining forests and protecting the communities and the peoples that live in and from it. Thank you so much for your leadership and good luck in the coming Conference of the Parties that you will be having. Okay, so now we will hear from the lead discussants of the high-level roundtable to set the stage for an interactive discussion. I give the floor now to the Deputy Executive Secretary of the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification, Ms. Tina Bermpili. Ma'am, you have the floor.
Your Excellency, Madam Chair, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, and dear colleagues. Greetings from the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification. It's an honor to address all of you at the UN Forum on Forests. Everything has been said, so I will try to be very brief. Forests contribute to human and planetary health far beyond their confines. This was the message that all the previous speakers have underlined. They absorb carbon dioxide, they stabilize rainfall patterns, lower temperatures, and protect against desertification, sun, the dust storms, and drought. They sustain more than 1.6 billion people, a crucial safety net for local populations. They provide food, water, medicine, and building materials. They can also buffer and slow the spread of zoonotic diseases. and they have an immediate restorative power: peace, clean air, visual splendor, no matter the season. As my colleague Elizabeth said, between 2015 and 2020, the rate of deforestation was estimated at 10 million hectares per year. The rate of loss has been in decline, but the slower pace is not a victory. Now, in this time of great upheaval with COVID-19, we have the chance to return our forests to life by strengthening commitments to forest restoration in updated pledges under the Paris Agreement, by meeting land restoration and land degradation neutrality commitments, both under the UNCCD and independently during the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration. And of course, by increasing ambition on protected areas when the world agrees a new biodiversity framework this year. An important opportunity lies in pandemic recovery spending. We all want our economies to recover from the pandemic. To give just one example, studies estimate that each US dollar invested in restoring degraded forests yields between $7 to $30 in economic benefits. From the point of the UNCCD, we would like to share 3 messages that hopefully could be part of the discussion that we follow. The first one is bringing land into balance is key to bringing food, water, energy, biodiversity into balance. The second one, commit to building in the post-pandemic era by restoring land, is a simple, inexpensive, and a solution accessible to all. A solution that will benefit small-scale farmers, including women farmers, who are responsible for most of the food production in developing countries. And finally, since we are going to also touch in your discussions the private sector, we believe that a third point would be projects that offer a mosaic of options and different entry points for the private sector to step in. We don't talk about only reforestation, we don't talk about biodiversity, we talk about farming, planting of trees, creation of jobs, digital transformation, as the president of the ECOSOC mentioned, access to electricity by all. The main message, therefore, and with this I will conclude, is that by investing in our forests, we are investing in our post-pandemic future with meaningful jobs, more secure livelihoods, broader rural prosperity, improved public health, food and water security, healthy biodiversity, and ecosystem services. I would like to thank you very much, and I wish you all the best in your discussions.
I thank the Deputy Executive Secretary of the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification for her statement. Thank you. Now I give the floor to the Director of the Transparency Division of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, Secretariat, Mr. Donald Cooper. Mr. Cooper, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, for inviting me to share a few thoughts on the important question of the role of forests. And it indeed is an honor to have an opportunity to address the forum. First of all, forests today are under enormous stress. Deforestation is still reducing the forest air in many regions. Climate impacts on forests are visible all over the world in the form of forest fires, pests, and droughts. And now, initial data shows that COVID-19 is also increasing the pressure on forests, as forest resources are used as a buffer in times of low legal enforcement and high economic distress. To continue their valuable contributions to the Sustainable Development Goals and to reach the Global Forest Goals, forests will require our support. We must all work together to limit the impact of climate change, and we must also help forests to adapt to climate change that is already unavoidable. If we do so, forests can continue to provide multiple benefits, including for climate adaptation and mitigation. According to the IPCC, properly managed forests can have the potential to remove between 2.8 and 26.9 gigatons of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere annually through reducing deforestation, improved forest management, afforestation, and restoration. Note the difference of 24 gigatons in the estimates. This is a lot. It is more than the entire annual CO2 emissions of both North America, European countries, and China combined. Realizing at least some of these 24 gigatons of forest mitigation potential require that we overcome several interrelated challenges and barriers, such as a lack of proper institutions, poor governance, accessibility to finance, agricultural expansion, and poverty. Proper implementation also ensures the continuation of multiple benefits and ecosystem services that contribute to the goals and objectives of different conventions and the SDGs, including for biodiversity, land degradation, water quality, livelihoods, and reducing poverty. As we all know, the key to such improvements in forest management is proper measurement to inform decision-making and provide evidence of the results of implemented actions. NDCs, REDD+, and the Enhanced Transparency Framework under the Paris Agreement contribute to improving the data and methodologies for such measurements. The Secretariat's initiative for universal participation in the Enhanced Transparency Framework aims to ensure that all parties have access to the means of implementation required to do so, in particular for capacity building. We think that the private sector can be an essential actor in sustainable forest management, for example, in the monitoring of the state of forests. However, to attract the private sector to engage more effectively to address global crises affecting forests, coherent policies for sustainable management will be critical. Thank you again, and back to you, Ambassador.
I thank the Director of the Transparency Division of the UNFCCC Secretariat for his statement. Our next discussant is the Executive Director of the Pulp Manufacturers Association of South Africa, Ms. Jane Maloney. Ms. Maloney, you have the floor.
Good morning, everybody. Sorry, I had a few technical problems. Trees are important for human health and well-being. Collectively in natural forests and plantations, trees can meet our economic, social, recreational, and even our spiritual needs. Trees and the timber they produce are widely recognized as a strategic response to climate change. During the pandemic and lockdown, almost all countries treated the forest and forest product sector as an essential service. This is a testament to our sector's value and role in society. Consider the words of Mahatma Gandhi. What we are doing to the forests of the world is a mirror reflection of what we are doing to ourselves and to one another. Or the words of the Bible, where trees are given a persona and will clap their hands and rejoice when God's people come out of exile. Whatever your worldview, we have all observed over the past year that collaboration is key to overcoming global challenges. It is no longer about each country for itself, especially when the health of our planet and its people is at stake. So how are forests part of the solution? Sustainably managed forests and production of ordinary and innovative products from wood rather than products from fossil-based materials can drive global economic and environmental recovery. Reducing the use of fossil-based materials is a battle that we cannot afford to lose. Research institutions need support around climate change research, especially on droughts, pests, and diseases. We need to promote the use of certified timber and make certification much more accessible to small-scale growers. If we can improve consumer understanding of our sector, It will increase demand for responsibly sourced wood and fiber-based products. We also need appropriate government policies to provide practical regulatory frameworks that minimize environmental impact and maximize the economic benefits of our forest-based green value chains. Underpinning all of this, we need a responsive and agile investments sector. Communities from around the world have found that growing trees help address complex social, economic, and environmental challenges. For example, in Burkina Faso, farmers are using centuries-old technique to grow trees in drought-stricken areas in the grips of desertification. In my home country, South Africa, the Sapi Kolisa project empowers small-scale farmers by providing seedlings, technical assistance, and interest-free loans with a guaranteed market for the timber harvest. Likewise, Kumazo in Kenya has been called the Airbnb of forestry and has empowered many to grow trees. Of course, if it was Airbnb, there would also be potential other issues. And from their urban high-rise offices, or more likely now from their home offices, pension funds and asset managers are at last reviewing investment in forestry as a good green bet, offering financial, environmental, and governance benefits. These initiatives give us hope, but more must be done, and without delay. As a member of the ACSFI, I am grateful for the United Nations system in general, and FAO and UNFF in particular. Your assistance to identify and upscale viable approaches to promote the sustainable management of our forests and ensure sustainable consumption and production patterns is invaluable. Thank you. Let's build back better by building with wood, the ultimate renewable.
Thank you, Ms. Maloney, Executive Director of the Pulp Manufacturers Association of South Africa, for your statement. The forum, ladies and gentlemen, excellencies, will now begin its interactive discussion. Participants wishing to intervene in the discussion are invited to use the dedicated speaker request form accessible on the chat board of the Interprefy portal. Please use the speaker form to request the floor. Before calling on the first speaker, may I remind delegations of the 3 minutes time limit in order to allow for maximum participation. And I have to share that we are running a little bit behind time, so we really need to adhere to these time limits. And I thank you for your cooperation. I now give the floor to the first speaker, His Excellency João Pedro Matos Fernandes, Minister for Environment and Climate Action from Portugal, NIC, on behalf of the European Union. Sir, Excellency, you have the floor. I see that the list has changed, I think, as I also do not hear a response from His Excellency the Minister of Portugal. Let's go to the representative of Slovenia, Mr. Anton Harej.
Thank you for the floor. Slovenia aligns itself with the position of the European Union and its member states that will be presented by the Portuguese presidency after my presentation. Slovenia, as a highly forested country, shares the concerns of the impact of the ongoing and emerging issues such as COVID, climate change, etc., with will have on forest and also on the possible conflicts between expectations on the functions forests provide. Forest provides multiple socioeconomic and environmental services and have huge potential to address global crises. Slovenia practices sustainable, multifunctional, and close to nature forestry. Our experiences teach us how sustainable forest management can improve situations. In such way, we can help the forests to be prepared and resilient for the future conditions, whilst enabling rural development and transmission into green bioeconomy. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your attention.
Thank you, distinguished representative of Slovenia. And I do apologize to the Minister of Environment and Climate Action, Mr. João Pedro Matos Fernandes. I should have given you some more time to connect. Please, sir, if you are able to, you have the floor. Portugal on behalf of the European Union.
Madam Chair, Excellencies, distinguished delegates. The year 2020 was a stark reminder, particularly through the COVID-19 crisis, of the need to implement the global forest goals through different actions, such as the protection, restoration, and sustainable management of forest ecosystems, and halt deforestation and loss of biodiversity on a global scale. These remind us of the close link between forest ecosystems' health and human health. The world must now take up the challenge of ensuring a sustainable and resilient recovery that promotes the economic, social, environmental dimensions of sustainable development at all levels. The EU and its member states wish to thank the United Nations Forums on Forests, Secretariat, and the Collaborative Partnership on Forests for their engagement in various activities in relation to the coronavirus disease, including the compilation of initial assessment of the impact of COVID-19 in the forestry sector and on sustainable forest management. We agree that the responses and measures already identified by the Secretariat in the support document for this session are very valuable, and they should be considered for the implementation at the national, regional, and international levels to step up the sustainable recovery, taking into account and adapting to the various needs and circumstances. Preventing outbreaks of pandemic is key, and this requires also actions in many other fields like food security, fight against poverty and hunger, just to name a few. The overall and forest sector economic impacts caused by COVID-19 are yet to be fully assessed, as the pandemic is still ongoing, but the EU and its member states are of the view that forests and sustainable forest management can and should be incorporated in the sustainable recovery of the economy and social, and thus contribute to the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. Finally, Madam Chair, the EU and its member states support the follow-up action to invite the Forum Secretariat in collaboration with the members of the Collaborative Partnerships on Forests, Forum members, regional and sub-regional partners, and major groups to conduct a second assessment in order to identify the broad range and long-term impacts of the pandemic on sustainable forest management, as well as potential solutions and recovery measures. The output of this assessment should be presented to the Forum at its 17th session in 2022. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I thank the distinguished representative of Portugal on behalf of EU, and thank you for the upcoming work. Next, I give the floor to His Excellency Mario Antonio Martinez Padilla, Director at the National Institute of Forest Conservation and Development, Protected Areas and Wildlife of Honduras. Is the representative, Mr. Padilla from Honduras, are you available? If not, we will follow and I will give you the floor again as soon as you are ready. Next, I give the floor to the representative of the Czech Republic, His Excellency Patrik Mlynar, Deputy Minister for Forestry, Ministry of Agriculture. You have the floor, sir. And you will be followed by the distinguished representative of Honduras first, if he is available, and after that, the representative of France. But now over to you, Your Excellency from Czech Republic.
I thank you, Madam Chair, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. We align ourselves with the statement provided by the European Union. The COVID-19 pandemic has attacked Czech forestry in the unfavorable times when we face the unprecedented impacts of climate change. Drought-induced bark beetle outbreak, the biggest in our history, both in terms of affected forest area, of infested timber volume. COVID-19 pandemic aggravated already complicated situation in our forest sector. This has led to the instability of the timber market, since record sanitation logging caused low timber prices that brought forest owners into a critical economic situation. We responded to this new situation with several tools, amongst others, a new legislation aiming at improving forest resilience to climate change, as well as new subsidies, aiming both at compensating the loss of income caused by forced sanitation logging to forest owners and at restoring the damaged forests. Regarding to question A, forests can be part of the solution through responses and measures provided in the Secretariat note. All suggested measures are relevant. We especially welcome the integration of forests and forestry in the recovery plans and the inclusion of the value of ecosystem services in the recovery plans. The response should address all three pillars of the sustainable forest management: economic, social, and environment. And to question B, we can say the private sector can be engaged by promoting worldwide communication about the benefits the forests bring to people and nature all around the world, from economic, environmental, and social point of view, with a special attention to the fact that forests and human health are fully interlinked and need to be further enhanced. We also support the preparation of the second assessment to identify the broad and long-term effects of the pandemic on sustainable forest management, as well as potential solutions and recovery measures. I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, distinguished representative of Czech Republic. I would like to now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Honduras, His Excellency, Mr. Martinez Padilla. I hope you are able to connect to us now. And he will be followed by the...
Thank you. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, good day. It's an honor to be addressing you. Honduras is a country with over than 112,000 square kilometers with a forestry vocation, some 65% of its territory covered by forest, although currently that figure of coverage is 56%, some 6.3 million hectares, different ecosystems. 41% of our national territory has been declared a protected area, classified in various areas of management with 4 reserves of biospheres. The Platano River one being highlighted as categorized by UNESCO as a mankind's heritage. This was very much affected and threatened by deforestation associated with the change in the use of soil. In the last 5 years, some 23,500 hectares have been affected in the broadleafed humid forest due to the change of soil with animal husbandry and coffee production. However, we're working on restoration in the National Restoration Project, working with the private and public sector for forestry management. Climate change has impacted us, which has been clear in 2 natural disasters that affected us in the last trimester of 2020, revealing the consequences in loss of life, human life, and an impact socioeconomically and environmentally. However, based on this, the government has led development and implementation of a national reconstruction plan, which in addition to focusing on human beings as a priority, also considers restoring the forests as a priority, focusing on the groundwater recharging areas of Ulua River, Aguan and Camelcion, and the Atlantic Zone. Should highlight also here the National Reconstruction Plan, which has a financial products policy. Also, deforestation is impacted with forest fires. But there have been significant advances in controlling. And here we'd like to highlight and recognize the contribution by the people and government of the United States through its forestry services and humanitarian assistance. As a country, we have been very supported. We feel supported as the first country of Latin America to subscribe to the Voluntary Association Agreement in the context of application of laws for forestry governance and trade. This process for us, and this is working bilaterally with the European Union, this for us is in the present and the future the cornerstone of sustainable forestry management, and with a community participation focus, respecting human rights and the rights of indigenous peoples and Afro-descendants. The pandemic has affected us partially and in a temporary manner in terms of work in the forestry sector. To date, it has had a significant impact in terms of the decline of ordinary activities associated with forestry management. However, we will be meeting our nationally determined contributions in the context of COP21, focused on restoration of over 15% of our lands. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Honduras. Thank you, sir. And next to receive the floor is the distinguished representative of France, His Excellency Mr. Pierre-Henri Guignard, Special Envoy to the Alliance for the Preservation of Tropical Rainforest. And after you, Excellency, will follow the representative of Nicaragua. Thank you. You have the floor.
My words to those of the Portuguese Minister of Environment on behalf of the European Union. And if I may, I will speak in French. So please go to the.
With air, water, and the land on which they depend, forests regulate the climate and host the majority of the planet's biodiversity. Tropical forests and rainforests in particular are a source of wealth for forest countries and a shared responsibility for us all. They represent the livelihoods of indigenous peoples and local communities that live off and in the forest. They constitute a treasure for humanity, a humanity which has no other choice but to protect them. This short text that I've just read out is an extract from the founding charter of the Alliance for the Preservation of Rainforests, and this was called for in 2019 by President Emmanuel Macron and the presidents of Colombia and Chile, the German Chancellor, and others, and supported today by 25 forest countries and others. While the world is tackling head-on COVID-19, scientists are highlighting the proven link now between deforestation and the spread of the virus. Conserving the forest is protecting human health, while expert studies confirm that 2020 was the hottest year ever recorded in Europe and in the Arctic. Conserving the forest is protecting the climate. While millions of species are threatened with extinction, and we've just been reminded of this, conserving the forest, which is home to 80% of the planet's biodiversity, and in particular tropical forests, is to protect life. The Alliance for the Preservation of Rainforests is something that expresses a very high level ambition. Its aim is not just to be a new body or not to be a new body, rather it is to strengthen international organizations, and there are a number represented here today, and existing mechanisms, and give them the means to act more effectively. The Alliance has three main priorities. Firstly, better coordinate the action of forest countries and consumer countries, which are often donors as well. Secondly, set up sustainable value chains, and this can only be done in cooperation with the private sector and the civil society. And thirdly, developing regional and international cooperation to prevent forest fires and to combat them more effectively, and also restore degraded soil after disasters. Yes, the Alliance has far-reaching ambitions for forests, for the climate, for biodiversity, and for human health. It's the heads of state and government that are the public face of this determination of the international community. However, their ambition and their action seeks to mobilize civil society and the private sector. Firstly, France has fully grasped the impact of the epidemic on indigenous and local populations. For example, measures have been taken in the Amazon in line with, or working rather with 8 national delegations of the Climate Alliance to provide healthcare and material and food to those living in the forest, and those people are particularly vulnerable on all fronts. Dialogue is underway with the private sector in order to guarantee for producers and consumers the establishment of sustainable value chains. Our companies must not import deforestation. Finally, and this is my final point, it's important that our states, and in particular those who are in charge of sustainable and responsible forest management, it's important they be attentive to the work of the scientific community, its recommendations, its observations, in particular those from satellites. All this must help us to preserve our forests, taking both a global and a local approach. We need to protect each square meter of our tropical forests in order to ensure that our planet survives. The Alliance is a coalition that's open to all. Its ambitions for forest is something that we should all be involved in. So for those who've not yet done so, I would urge all those to join the Alliance if you've not yet done so, and contact France in order to do so. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you much, the distinguished representative of France. And next, I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Nicaragua, followed by the representative of Indonesia. Right now, may I invite His Excellency Javier Guterres, Vice Minister of Environment and Natural Resources of
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'd like to extend greetings from the President of Nicaragua, Madam Chair. The COVID is affecting trade in Latin America and the Caribbean. It's highlighting development issues and inequality issues. The interpretation is suspended due to a sound quality that does not support interpretation.
Por millón, la tasa de pérdida neta de bosque entre el 2010 y el 2020 fue de 4.7 millones de hectáreas al año, es decir, cada día se deforesta alrededor de 400.000 hectáreas de bosques. Cuarta, la doble asimetría en temas ambientales y la importancia de defender el principio de responsabilidades comunes, pero diferenciadas y capacidades respectivas. Los costos de mitigación y adaptación sobre el cambio climático, incluyendo pérdidas y daños, no deben de recaer a todos por igual. Los países más ricos fueron los que más contribuyeron al deterioro ambiental y los que más se benefician. Son los que más esfuerzo deben de hacer para reducir los impactos. Señora Presidenta, el panel intergubernamental sobre el cambio climático indicó que si el aumento de la temperatura llegara a 1.5 grados, los objetivos de desarrollo sostenible se perderán debido a menos agua, menos rendimiento de la tierra por alimentos, menos nutrición, más enfermedades, más pobreza y más desigualdad. De tal manera, la meta para estabilizar la temperatura promedio global de 1.5 es imprescindible e impostergable para la sobrevivencia humana. La falta de recursos adicionales para el desarrollo y el bajo nivel de ambición de los países desarrollados ponen en riesgo el incumplimiento de las metas. De tal manera, es fundamental que los países desarrollados cumplan con el compromiso para la ayuda al desarrollo. Señora Presidenta, Nicaragua no es responsable de la crisis climática y ambiental. Apenas emitimos el 0.03% de las emisiones globales, pero es un país altamente sensible y vulnerable a los impactos del cambio climático. En noviembre de 2020 fuimos golpeados por dos fenómenos naturales extremos, huracanes ETA y IOTA, dejándonos daños por el orden de los $800 millones que representan el 6% del Producto Interno Bruto. A pesar de lo anterior, nuestro país cuenta con áreas protegidas, 7% de la diversidad mundial, 68 ecosistemas y alrededor del 25% del territorio nacional cubierto por bosque, donde estos, el 50% está autogestionado por gobiernos territoriales indígenas. El gobierno de Nicaragua hace grandes esfuerzos para combatir la pobreza. Desarrollamos un modelo de democracia directa, bioeconomía bajo enfoque de soluciones socioeconómicas basadas en la naturaleza, economía creativa y solidaria y el buen vivir en armonía con la madre tierra. El gobierno de Nicaragua está realizando también acciones sobre deforestación y degradación de los bosques, incluye manejo forestal comunitario, procesos nacionales de Red Plus, cobertura forestal aumentándola alrededor de unas 25.000 hectáreas al año y alrededor de 3 millones de hectáreas al 2030. También Nicaragua involucra a más de 1 millón de protagonistas relevantes en la gestión forestal, como son jóvenes, grupos sociales, gobiernos locales, gobiernos indígenas, empresas privadas y comunidades. También Nicaragua respalda la iniciativa de restauración 20x20 y la década de Naciones Unidas para la restauración de ecosistemas aprobada en la Asamblea el 1 de marzo. El COVID, señora Presidenta, es una señal de creciente irrespeto del ser humano en los ecosistemas del planeta. Las enfermedades zoonóticas emergentes muestran las consecuencias negativas de la presión humana sobre la naturaleza. Esto acelera la degradación de nuestros ecosistemas y la deforestación de los bosques. Pero también el COVID es una buena oportunidad para cambiar los modelos de desarrollo, consumo y producción hacia sistemas solidarios, respetuosos y cooperativos. Asimismo, invitamos a la comunidad internacional que asegure los medios de implementación para la transición ecológica en países en desarrollo en el contexto de la recuperación del COVID-19. También instamos a reconocer los bosques y la restauración como la mejor forma de resiliencia ante el cambio climático. Asimismo, Nicaragua reafirma el compromiso para continuar trabajando hacia un modelo de desarrollo sostenible, cuidado y amor y respeto hacia la madre tierra. Muchas gracias, señora Presidenta.
I thank the distinguished representative of Nicaragua, and I apologize for the technical difficulties as a result of which translations did not seem to come through. Before we continue the list, I do have to announce that we are now closing the speakers list. Very happy that the interest is so much, but we only have exactly a half hour left, and we also have another last segment after our discussion. Also want to remind the participants to keep their interventions to the allotted 3 minutes, and also remind you all that your statement can be sent in written form, and it will be posted on the UNFF website. And now I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Indonesia, His Excellency Agus Yustianto, Deputy Minister of Environment and Forestry of the Republic of Indonesia, and he will be followed by the representative of Germany. Indonesia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The impact of climate change stands directly before us. COVID-19 and the global recession further complicate these challenges. Indonesia has undertaken a balanced approach in addressing the impact of pandemic. We continue the steadfast in achieving our environmental and climate action commitment while addressing the health crisis and economic recovery. Against this background, allow me to share some of our progress so far. First, on the advancement in forest sector. Indonesia has successfully stopped the conversion of natural forests and peatland amounting to 66 million hectares, larger than the size of the UK and Norway combined. Last year, we have achieved lowest deforestation rate in decades, as low as 0.0 0.1 million hectares, while slashing 82% of our forest fires. All of these are attained while the world witnessing the increase of deforestation as well as ravaging forest fire in various countries. We are rehabilitating 620,000 hectares of mangrove and to be completed by 2024, the largest in the world with 4 times carbon absorption compared to tropical forests. Second, on pandemic recovery policies. In order to cope with this pandemic situation, the government of Indonesia has been issuing various policies to help stimulate the economy through several interventions, including supporting MSMEs, acceleration of the development of community forests, and various support to timber-based industries that is twinned with government support towards compliance on market requirements such as timber legality assurance. In closing, we will continue our balanced approach during our G20 presidency in 2022 that will put the enhanced cooperation in climate change and sustainable development as one of the priorities. I thank you, Madam Chair.
I thank very much the distinguished representative of Indonesia. At this point, I also need to announce, dear participants, given the time, we are now going to have to cut off the mic at 3 minutes. I ask your indulgence for this and cooperation, but we want to have everyone be able to speak. So next, I will give the floor to the representative of Germany, Ms. Eva Mueller, Director General for European and International Forest Policy at the Federal Ministry of Food and Agriculture. She will be followed by the representative of the United States. Ms. Mueller, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Germany aligns itself with the statement of the EU. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, forests in Germany are an integral part of our cultural landscape. They fulfill a diverse range of functions simultaneously and in the same area. The principle of sustainability is firmly anchored in our forest legislation, our tradition, and long-term experience. And this pays off in terms of manifold forest-based solutions to current crises. For example, in the pandemic, 90% of the German public see forests as the space for experiencing nature, and recreational visits to forests have more than doubled. Forests preserve our biodiversity. The loss of biodiversity observed in agricultural and other landscapes is not occurring in our forests. And forests and sustainable forestry contribute effectively and inexpensively to achieving climate neutrality. Without them, yearly greenhouse gas emissions in Germany would be up to 14% higher. However, the climate change-related extreme weather events in the past 3 years have had a huge impact on our forests, causing significant damage. As a response, we developed a set of actions linked to our National Climate Protection Program to promote restoring degraded forest areas, adapting our forests to climate change, and promoting investments in forestry and innovative and climate-friendly wood construction. The 1.5 billion euros the German government has made available for this demonstrates our confidence in forest-based solutions. In fact, Germany strongly believes in the huge potential of forest-based solutions to address global challenges and to achieve the SDGs. But it is essential to scale up actions worldwide to realize this potential. The pandemic has taught us that business as usual is not a pathway for sustainable recovery. We need to be creative and innovative, creating win-win situations for forests and the actors influencing them. And this includes the private sector. And here I do not mean only large agricultural or forest-based companies, but also small farmers and forest producers and others along the supply chain. It also includes consumers. Sustainable and deforestation-free supply chains of agricultural and forest products have to pay off for those involved. And this implies a need for concerted engagement of governments to create a policy and fiscal framework that facilitates and promotes private sector involvement in sustainable supply chains. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Germany, and I next give the floor to the representative of the United States, Ms. Christine Dawson. She is the director at the Office of Conservation and Water in the Bureau of Oceans and International Environmental and Scientific Affairs. She will be followed by the representative of China. Ms. Dawson, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, and colleagues, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to attend the high-level roundtable on behalf of the United States and to make a brief statement about our plans to build back better from the COVID-19 pandemic. The U.S. recovery features a government-wide response to the climate crisis to increase resilience, conserve our lands and waters, and protect public health. Forests will play a crucial role in our sustainable recovery. Natural ecosystems are essential for addressing post-pandemic priorities of human well-being, sustainable economic development, food security, disaster risk reduction, biodiversity conservation, and adaptation and mitigation to climate change. Visitors to U.S. national forests, about 300 million a year, contribute over $11 billion to the U.S. economy annually and sustain more than 148,000 jobs. The 2020 Great American Outdoors Act provides $900 million annually for Land and Water Conservation Fund. The act will support voluntary conservation on private lands, improve national forest infrastructure, conserve working timberlands, protect watersheds, and improve access to public lands for traditionally underserved communities. President Biden has called for the United States to achieve the goal of conserving at least 30% of U.S. lands and waters by 2030, and he has set in motion a whole-of-government effort to use nature-based solutions to meet this goal and to closely coordinate with U.S. indigenous communities across all these efforts. The United States rejoined the Paris Agreement, and during last week's Leaders Summit on Climate, released an ambitious new nationally determined contribution target to cut net greenhouse gas emissions by 50 to 52% below 2005 levels by 2030. We will work with all of our partners, both bilaterally and multilaterally, to raise climate ambition in the lead up to the 26th Conference of the Parties of the UNFCCC. The pandemic has shown the world the devastating effects of human encroachment, habitat loss, and land degradation on human well-being. Good governance, including engagement with indigenous peoples and stakeholders in policy decisions, is critical to sustaining and securing sustainable forest management. To avoid degradation of forest ecosystems, it is critical that we draw on a variety of policy approaches and strengthen integrated land management. We continue to emphasize scientific research and innovation in renewable energies material to aid the global post-pandemic recovery. Thank you.
I thank the representative of the United States, and I now give the floor to the representative of China, Mr. Chonfeng Wang, Director General of International Cooperation Center, National Forestry and Grassland Administration. He will be followed by the representative of Korea. Mr. Wang. We are not receiving audio, Mr. Wang. Would you like to try again? I am not receiving audio. I really apologize.
Hello,
Right.
Madam Chair, could you hear me?
Now we are on. Yes. Wonderful.
Okay, thank you very much. 好，打开那个文字，对 ，OK，谢谢主席。
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning.
As the previous speakers stated, COVID-19 pandemic has brought about great challenges to the human society. Unsustainable forest management has also been severely affected to some extent. How to achieve rapid green recovery after the pandemic is a common challenge of all countries. Our assessment indicates that the pandemic has also had huge impact on China's forestry, especially on forest industry and the export and import trade in forest products. The service industry such as ecotourism and forest therapy have suffered great losses, and the forestry scientific research, forest certification, and international cooperation are affected to some extent, while there was only minor impact on forest management activities in China. After the pandemic, the Chinese government took effective measures to contain the pandemic quickly and efficiently. The National Forestry and Grassland Administration acted promptly under the unified deployment of the Chinese central government and proactively responded to the adverse impact of the pandemic. First, we have strengthened organization and coordination, adopting measures tailored to specific local conditions to promote forest restoration and operation. Second, we have strengthened policy guidance and promoted better alignment between production and the sales of forest products. Third, we have sought financial support and implemented favorable policies of taxes and fees for forestry. These measures made it possible for Chinese forest restoration and the management to be back to normal. Forest enterprises gradually resumed their business activities and economic vitality, and the major index of trade in forest products also gradually recovered. The progress is mainly attributed to the effective containment of COVID-19 pandemic. The painful lessons of the pandemic forced human society to rediscover the relationship between man and nature in the post-pandemic era, which further raised the awareness of harmonious coexistence between human and nature and give full play to forestry in coping with the global crisis after pandemic and promoting employment, economic development, and poverty alleviation of local communities in forest areas. Over the years, we have lifted more than 20 million people in forest areas out of poverty through forestry and ecological measures. We have taken actions on forest restoration, management, and protection, which have continuously expanded forest area, improved forest quality and carbon sink capacity, and will make new contributions to peaking the carbon emission by 2030, realizing carbon neutrality by 2060, addressing climate change, and protecting and restoring biodiversity. To this end, we call on member states and relevant international organizations to further strengthen exchanges and cooperation under the framework of the UN SPF, share successful experiences, leverage the strength of forestry to jointly address the global crises. Thank you. Chair.
The representative of China, and now I give the floor to the representative of the Republic of Korea, to be followed by the representative of Peru. Unsik Park does have the floor. Korea.
Thank you for giving me the floor, Madam Chair. Excellencies and dear colleagues, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. What we have learned from our successful forest restoration is increasing carbon sinks through forest restoration and sustainable management, and enhancing resilience of forests is key to overcoming global environmental crises such as climate change and biodiversity loss. To share our experience with global society, Korea has launched the Peace Forest Initiative with the UNCCD and is working closely together with FAO in forest and landscape restoration mechanism. The Forest Ecosystem Restoration Initiative, established by the Korea Forest Service and CBD, is also playing an important role for biodiversity conservation. In addition to this effort, we are starting a new project for forest disaster management, applying innovative technologies to protect forest and wildlife from emerging threats like forest fires. Early this year, the Korea Forest Service announced a forest carbon strategy, including 3 billion tree planting plan for the next 3 decades to contribute to achieving carbon neutrality. Enhancing forest ecosystem service such as forest healing programs is also meaningful to increase welfare and to return to normal life beyond the pandemic. I believe that the discussions on how to address climate crisis and impacts of the COVID-19 will continue at this forum. As well as this effort, the global society needs to keep putting more effort for finding a better way to go. To provide a platform for productive discussions on various issues, Korea will host the 15th World Forestry Congress from May 2nd to 6th next year in partnership with FAO. With the main theme, building a green, healthy, and resilient future with forests, the Congress also has very timely six sub-themes. It is my sincere hope that the global forestry community, including UNFF member countries, will participate in the 15th World Forestry Congress. In particular, the Private Sector Investment Forum in the Congress will be a great opportunity for the participants to discuss contributions and investment from the private sector and exchange environmental, social, and governance-related information. Lastly, a side event hosted by the 15th World Forestry Congress team from FAO and Korea Forest Service will take place at 1:30 p.m. today to draw your undivided attention to the upcoming Congress. Your participation will be highly appreciated, and I hope to see you all at this event. I thank you.
Thank you much, distinguished representative of Republic of Korea. Before we continue and looking at the clock, unfortunately, dear participants, we have to reduce now the time of your intervention to 2 minutes, after which automatic cutoff will have to happen. On my list, I have next Peru, Colombia, El Salvador, Brazil, Argentina, Kenya, the Asian Forest Cooperation Organization, and the International Union of Forest Research Organizations, in that order. So I now, without losing any more time, give the floor to the representative of Peru, Mr.
Thank you very much for giving me the floor. Good day, distinguished colleagues. The world crisis created by the pandemic is added to the negative effects of climate change and a crisis underway due to the loss of biodiversity and habitat and forestry. In Peru, the lessons learned in 2020 with regard to the pandemic's impact have made it necessary to pay closer attention to the interrelationship between human beings and all kinds of forests to achieve sustainable development. It's worthwhile saying that for every tree, there's always a person. And in Peru, we have some 73 million hectares of natural forests, which account for about 60% of our territory. Conservation and sustainable management of forests is one of our goals, and one goal is to guarantee food supplies for local communities, indigenous peoples, small producers, women and young people. And that is an enormous challenge. The COVID pandemic in Peru led to a forced stoppage in forestry activities. Some 1,500 forestry management plans could not be approved, which is a loss of jobs of some 52,000 jobs lost directly or indirectly. There was also a fall of 53% in import income from wood due compared to the year before. There was also ongoing pressure on tropical forest due to the expansion of farming, commercial farming, industrial farming, which has led to a change in the use of soil, which increased the greenhouse gas emissions by over 50%. To meet this challenge, Peru urges states to join, and the speaker was cut off, says the interpreter.
I thank the representative of Peru, and I now give the floor to the representative of Colombia, Mr.
Thank you very much, Chair. If I may, I'd like to start by thanking the organizers of this important roundtable, given the difficulties imposed by the pandemic. Deforestation is the main challenge for Colombia in the area of conservation and sustainable development, especially in rural areas. Deforestation is a strategic concern for the national government, taking into account that 52% of the national territory is covered by forests, and they play a strategic role in the use, management, and conservation of biological biodiversity. protection of water resources, mitigation, and adaptation to climate change. Colombia has adopted a number of measures to protect forests and manage them sustainably through community forest management, the forestry policy, and plans of action for zero deforestation in different productive change. Deforestation is a multidimensional problem in our country and needs to be addressed in an interinstitutional manner, which requires coordination through the National Council to fight deforestation with the Artemisa campaign, which impacts 14,000 hectares that are illegally deforested. We're working on construction of global comprehensive framework legally. This will be taking place before the COP meetings to protect biodiversity, which will be key in the process of protecting forests and assets of world biodiversity in coming years. International cooperation is key to complement national efforts to stop deforestation. And in that regard, Colombia would like to thank the donor countries and multilateral organizations that have contributed to important programs to fight deforestation of the Amazon and to the Fund for the Environment. And the speaker has listed several other organizations. Given the current situation, there's a strict relationship between mankind and nature and the need to make progress with our commitments that relate to conservation, especially with forests. Conservation of natural forests, the speaker was cut off.
I thank the representative of Colombia, and I now give the floor to the representative of El Salvador, Mr. of El Salvador, Mr. Segura. We will continue as I don't see any connection yet, and we will come back to you. Mr. Pedro Neto is next, a representative of Brazil. He is the Director General of the Brazilian Forest Service. Mr. Neto, am I correct?
Thank you, Ms. Chair. The action of Brazilian Forest Service is based on three main points. The first one, environmental regularization with the advances of the implementation of Forest Code. Point two, forest concessions with the goals of having 4 million hectares under concession by the end of 2022. And three, forest development with the action of stimulating the sustainable forest economy. The valorization of the forest and the economic assets for sustainable use guaranteed its conservation and promoted its income generation for the population. The insertion of forests in the theme of low carbon agriculture with its potential to generate value should be an attraction for the private sector. From the point of view of natural forests, the potential for sustainable exploration is very large, and we have increased the market share of non-timber products by more than 100%. With regards to wood products, the Brazilian Forest Service has been expanding the forest concession in public forests year after year. Also, they contribute to the maintenance and recovering of forests in private areas by promoting environmental regularization and by encouraging the economic valuation of forest assets in rural properties by the implementation of projects of forest recovery. We strengthen the participation of the forest sector in the climate agenda. So I hope we have all of us have a great meeting, and this discussion of impacts of pandemic on the forest sector is very important in these moments. Thank you, Ms. Chair.
Thank you much, Representative of Brazil. I would like to now give the floor again to the representative of El Salvador, if he is ready, Mr. Carlos Segura. If you are ready, please take the floor. It doesn't seem to be that. the case. I next then give the floor to the representative of Argentina, Ms. Reina Sotillo. You have the floor. Argentina.
Los bosques son un factor fundamental.
It's fundamental to achieve sustainable development. It's also a cross-cutting issue in the social and economic functions in terms of contributing to carbon, helping the environment, preserving human life and nature. With regard to socioeconomic livelihoods of those communities that survive based on the forest and given the impact of climate change, Argentina's response is sustainable management of forests. There are many effects of forests on biodiversity, soil conservation, fighting desertification, preserving lakes, and fighting climate change. Therefore, we are working to that end. 37 million hectares is the extension of coverage of forests in Argentina. How do we work? We have a number of different community plans which seek to contribute to sustainable development of rural populations who were the indigenous peoples of the forests. We have forest basin plans to develop forests on a regional basis throughout the territory and to promote the value chains. The integrated approach is an innovation in the region without prejudice to other countries who are making progress along the same lines. Our goal is to promote lasting sustainable production chains using native woods and adapted to the needs of the country. The role of the private sector in Argentina is key because it can mobilize and bring investment for development and forest conservation. And the Republic of Argentina has increasingly seen a need for contribution towards the development of carbon markets. Public resources are insufficient. We need additional sources. We would highlight, and the speaker was cut off, points out the interpreter.
I thank much the representative of Argentina. Next, I give the floor to the representative of Kenya, Mr. Julius Kamau. He is the national focal point. Mr. Kamau, you have the floor.
Your Excellencies and colleagues, allow me to start by my contribution to this discussion by thanking you and the Bureau for your able leadership of steering the activities of the forum during these very difficult times that the world is going through as a result of the devastation action by the COVID-19 pandemic. Kenya participated and provided inputs to the regional studies on the impact of COVID-19 pandemic, which were commissioned by the forum on the forestry sectors, forest-dependent people, local communities, and sustainable forest management. With regards to the suggestion on undertaking a second assessment to identify the short and long-term effect of the pandemic on sustainable forest management, as well as potential solution and recovery measures, Kenya considers this suggestion favorably and commits to provide necessary information in support to the second assessment, as we did for the first assessment. The forest sector and the sustainable management of forests in Kenya, like in all the other member states or to the forum, have been negatively affected by the COVID-19 pandemic in multiple ways. Among them, the restriction on human interaction and the lockdown, which limited the movement of Kenyans from one area to the other, also had huge effect on our desire to conduct tree planting activities, forest ecosystem monitoring, and participation of local communities in forest-based livelihood activities. Kenya has further reviewed the proposed responses and measures contained in Section 4 of the Secretariat Note at the national and international level and support their implementation. Indeed, Kenya has already instituted some of these proposed responses to the pandemic, among them, and with regard to Section 455 on integration of sustainable forest management into pandemic management plans, Kenya has made a provision within its budgetary system for funding tree planting activities under its post-COVID-19 economic recovery program from the financial year 2020-2021. Kenya has also initiated and rolled out the Kazi Mtaani program, under which the youths are engaged for seedling production, tree planting, and environmental cleanup activities, involvement of the forest adjacent communities in the plantation establishment and livelihood improvement scheme, and these interventions have provided vulnerable groups with income to support their livelihood. With regard to the inclusion of the value of ecosystem services, Kenya acknowledges that its current contribution.
I thank the representative of Kenya for his remarks. And I now give the floor to the representative of the Philippines, Mr. Marcial Amaro. You have the floor, sir. Philippines.
Yes.
Here we go.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening from Manila. The Philippines reaffirms its commitment to continuously promote sustainable forest management and exert vigorous efforts to achieve the 6 shared global goals on forests by rehabilitating unproductive, denuded, and degraded forest lands through the country's enhanced National Greening Program, National Forest Protection Program, and other initiatives. Since 2011, through the Enhanced Greening Program, we were able to rehabilitate a total of 2 million hectares of degraded forest lands with 1.8 billion seedlings planted nationwide. Due to the restrictions brought about by the COVID-19 pandemic, the Philippines implemented policy improvements, and in 2020, our country shifted to family implementation approach to support our government's objective of providing additional income to upland and rural families affected by the pandemic. We also focused on planting bamboo as a priority commodity because bamboo plays an important role in soil stabilization, air quality improvement, erosion control, and carbon sequestration. The Philippine forestry sector has been actively involved in addressing the impacts of the pandemic. The Department of Environment and Natural Resources, in partnership with the Department of Agriculture, use the mechanized and modernized forest nursery facilities for agricultural production to ensure food security during community quarantine. A total of 3.2 million vegetable seedlings were produced and distributed to local government units, communities, and people's organizations affected by the pandemic. The forestry sector also donated a total of 272,000 board feet of confiscated lumber to government agencies and institutions for the construction of COVID-19 quarantine facilities and quarters. We also have updated the National Forestry Protection Program for 2021 to 2025 to emphasize the significance of improving forest cover in mitigating the impacts of climate change. On March 21st this year, as we pave the road to recovery and restoration, the Philippines joined the international community in celebrating the International Day of Forests 2021 with the theme Forest Restoration, a path to recovery and well-being through a webinar and series of
I thank the distinguished representative of the Philippines, and I next give the floor to the representative, Mr. Ricardo Calderon of the Asian Forest Cooperation Organization. You have the floor, sir.
Gentlemen.
One second.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, thank you, Madam Chair. Good day, New York. Good morning from Seoul, South Korea. The Asian Forest Cooperation Organization and its 13 member parties and 2 observers recognize the cross-cutting nature of issues related to forests, a very important natural capital that has to be managed sustainably in order to address the current global crisis. Sustainable management of forests, or SFM, has evolved from the traditional timber harvesting notion of growth equals drain. In this global pandemic, and in order to build back better, the global community should optimize the sustainable management of forests for water to irrigate our farmlands and produce clean energy, for biodiversity and wildlife resources management in order to prevent the future zoonotic diseases, for carbon storage and removal to sustain industrial production, and for ecotourism for the urban population, generating revenue to forest-dependent people. It should be emphasized that forests and forestry is not just a sector, but an activity and a process that could provide synergy and co-benefits to agriculture, like agroforestry, clean energy and sustainable flow of water, for farmlands, for food production, and to the private sector by greening the industry in mitigating their carbon emissions, sustaining industrial activity that employs millions of people worldwide. We believe that these messages should be communicated more widely and consistently across the sectors and regions. At the same time, we should be able to clearly demonstrate how SFM can contribute to build back better, the greener in the post-COVID pandemic. AFOCO and its 13-member parties and 2 observers will always be committed to these actions. Kamsahamnida.
I thank the representative of the Asian Forest Cooperation Organization and give the floor now to our last speaker, from the International Union of Forest Research Organizations, Mr. John Parota.
Opportunity to speak. As we have heard during this excellent discussion, there is growing demand to harness the potential of the world's forests and the services they provide to help address current global crises and contribute to the attainment of the Sustainable Development Goals. The forest science community, which UFOR represents, has much to offer in this effort. Over many decades, it has generated a wealth of reliable data, information, knowledge, and experience, all of which are needed to make the most of the opportunities we have to build back better. Through our work, we seek to provide the best available scientific knowledge, data, and expertise to decision makers at all levels, from policymakers at the global level to land managers at the local level. For example, UFRO is engaged in an extensive array of knowledge synthesis, training, and communication efforts related to forest landscape restoration in many countries, particularly in the global south. UFO also leads the Collaborative Partnership on Forest Global Forest Expert Panels program. The assessments produced through this program are specifically designed to serve the needs of policymakers, providing objective and independent scientific evaluations of key issues related to forests and their roles in enhancing environmental, social, and economic benefits they provide. In recent years, GFEP assessments have focused on many key issues, including the most recent assessment on forests and poverty. We encourage the Forum and member states to strengthen engagement with the scientific community and reiterate UFRO's strong commitment to support the Forum's critically important work with the best available knowledge and scientific information on key topics to support evidence-based decision-making. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Parota from the International Union of Forest Research Organizations. Dear delegates, we have now reached the end of the high-level roundtable. Before we continue, I have to, and given the time, it's exactly 11:10, and per our arrangements, the interpreters now have to be released so that they could come on board again in our next segment. We still have left last part of this morning's session, and I now invite the Forum to hear a statement by the Undersecretary General for Economic and Social Affairs, Mr. Liu Zhenmin. Sir, you have the floor.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, the United Nations Forum on Forests was the first UN intergovernmental body last year that took immediate action to cope with the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic on the forest sector. This important event has been organized as a follow-up to last year's decision of the Forum. I wish to congratulate members of the Forum for playing such a proactive role in this time of crisis. The discussions during today's high-level roundtable convey both a feeling of concern over the challenges we face and one of hope and optimism that we can overcome them. Indeed, we're experiencing multiple and unprecedented socio-economic and ecological crises. Global temperatures are projected to rise by up to 3.2 degrees centigrade by 2100. Over 1 million species are threatened with extinction. Water scarcity could displace 700 million people by 2030, and 2.2 billion lack safe drinking water. 10 million hectares of forest are destroyed, and forest fires burn approximately 450 million hectares of land every year. The COVID-19 pandemic has exacerbated the severity and the complexity of the situation. It pushed over 131 million people into extreme poverty in 2020 alone. Ladies and gentlemen, we all live on one planet and share one future. Thus, the policies we are setting at the national and the international levels should be underpinned by a coherent approach to nature and humanity. An action that disturbs the delicate balance between nature and human life will have adverse consequences for all of us. The 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development addresses the social, economic, and environmental needs of people with nature in an integrated framework that overcomes sectoral approaches and silos. In this context, forests play a fundamental role to maintain the vital balance between nature and human life. At the same time, forests are under threat of degradation, devastating fires, illegal logging, pests, and extreme weather events. It is therefore essential for the global community to accelerate implementation of the 2030 Agenda, as well as the UN Strategic Plan for Forests, to confront these threats and secure a sustainable future for all. Dear colleagues, allow me to highlight some key messages stemming from our today's discussion. First, sustainable forest management should be integrated in post-pandemic recovery strategies. Forests make significant contributions to offset many of the social, economic, and environmental impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic and other global challenges. Second, eradication poverty and hunger should be given top priority in the post-pandemic recovery efforts. The forest sector, including agroforestry, could play an important role in addressing unemployment and food security. Third, we must also redouble efforts and use the potential of forests to provide social protection and safety nets, especially to the vulnerable groups. This will help make societies more resilient and better prepared for health and humanitarian emergencies. Fourth, sustainable forest management is crucial for ambitious climate action, reversing biodiversity loss and preventing land degradation. Healthy and resilient forests are vital for effective ecosystem management in a post-pandemic era, given their interlinkages with many SDGs. Fifth, science and technology, financial resources, and capacity building data collection and analysis are all critical for addressing the impacts and reducing the risks of future pandemics. Thus, we need better science policy interface, increased investment, and more effective governance in our pandemic response and recovery. 6, strengthening of intersectoral collaboration is also an important step to ensure optimal and efficient land use planning. The pandemic has highlighted the need for enhanced use of online learning platforms and expanded use of information and communication technologies. Dear friends, I wish to encourage the forum to continue to pursue its pivotal role in shaping global policies on forests. We in the UN Department of Economic and Social Affairs, UN DESA, stand ready to support the work of the forum and spare no efforts to ensure its success. I thank you for your attention.
I thank very much the Undersecretary General for Economic and Social Affairs for his statement. And I also thank our distinguished speakers, all of them, for your participation and contribution. Distinguished delegates, in accordance with our organization of work, I will briefly adjourn the meeting now in order to prepare for the next part of our program. And as you have noticed also, we have used up our time for the break, so we will continue. So please remain in the platform. Before concluding this meeting, I would like to once again invite all participants to visit the side events organized along the margins of the forum. A list of these side events is available on the forum website. The meeting is adjourned, and again, please stay in the platform as we immediately will follow with the second session. Thank you all.
Perfect. Thank you everyone for rejoining us for this second meeting. I am pleased to welcome you all to the second virtual informal meeting of the 16th session of the United Nations Forum on Forests. Before I begin, I acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land that I am chairing this meeting from, the Ngunnawal people, who are the first inhabitants of my region in Australia. I acknowledge and respect their continuing culture and the contribution they make to the life of this city of Canberra and the region. And I pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. Distinguished delegates, I now invite the forum to turn to item 3G of its agenda, monitoring, assessment, and reporting, for the launch of the forum's flagship publication, the Global Forest Goals Report 2021. This launch event of the first Global Forest Goal Report is an historic moment for this forum. Since its inception, the UNFF has invited member states to submit voluntary national reports on progress made towards sustainable forest management. These voluntary reports formed the basis for the Secretariat's report on monitoring, assessment, and reporting, which is a standing item on the UNFF agenda. The adoption of the United Nations Strategic Plan for Forests in 2017 was a landmark moment for the forum and its members. The need to track progress towards the global forest goals became all the more pressing as the forest community sought to highlight how forests were also ultimately contributing to the SDGs of the 2030 Agenda. After several rounds of consultations, the forum developed and adapted a national reporting framework format on progress made in implementing the strategic plan and its goals and targets. The first round of national reporting on progress towards the implementation of the strategic plan was conducted in 2019 and 2020, during which 52 members submitted their voluntary national reports. Building on these reports, the Global Forest Goals Report marks the first time the Forum has produced a publication of this depth, showcasing how countries around the world are taking action in support of the strategic plan and integrating forests into their efforts to strengthen sustainable development. While the data in this report was collected prior to the outbreak of the global pandemic, the need for further action to strengthen sustainable forest management in all countries across all regions has never been more apparent. In addition to being a member of the UNFF 16 Bureau, I've also served as a member of the informal advisory group on the first UNFF flagship publication. It is therefore a particular pleasure to preside over this meeting and moderate this launch event. Distinguished delegates, we will now hear opening remarks from the Under-Secretary General for Economic and Social Affairs, Mr. Liu Jingmin, and the Deputy Director General of the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, Ms. Maria Helena Semedo. I first invite the Forum to hear a statement by the Under-Secretary General for Economic Social Affairs, Mr. Liu Jingmin, on the launch of the publication.
Excellencies, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to welcome you to the launch of the UN DESA's inaugural Global Forest Goals Report 2021. 4 years ago, the United Nations Strategic Plan for Forests 2017 to 2030 was created. Its mission was to promote sustainable forest management and enhance the contribution of forests and trees to the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. The strategic plan encompasses 6 voluntary and universal global forest goals and 26 associated targets. Its adoption was a historic moment for the United Nations Forum on Forests. It demonstrated the political will and ambition of the forest community to accelerate implementation of the 2030 Agenda. The plan recognized that to create a world in which forests could provide economic, social, environmental, and cultural benefits for all, we would first and foremost need more forests. Accordingly, the first global forest goal set a target for increasing forest area by 3%, or 120 million hectares by 2030. This is an area roughly the size of South Africa. The aim of this inaugural report is to present an overview of the progress achieved thus far, based on available national and global data. The report highlights where actions are being taken and where gaps and challenges remain. It also includes success stories that showcase best practices in sustainable forest management. When forests are healthy and well managed, they play a crucial role in eradicating poverty, combating climate change, conserving biodiversity, protecting watersheds, and building food and energy security. Forests support the livelihoods of some of the most vulnerable segments of our society, especially the rural poor and indigenous peoples. And during the COVID-19 pandemic, the forest sector has provided us with essential health products, including masks, cleaning supplies, and arsenal for sanitizers. Forests can also provide a natural buffer against the transmission of zoonosis. Excellencies, as we work towards building resilience and reducing the risk of future pandemics, forests play a crucial role. Indeed, investing in forests is an investment in a more resilient future. Yet, as much as forests offer us, they also continue to be under threat. Every year, 7 million hectares of natural forests are converted to other land uses, such as large-scale commercial agriculture and other economic activities. Although the global rate of deforestation has slowed over the past decade due to efforts by countries, we continue to lose forests in the tropics, largely due to human and natural causes. Moreover, we are seeing indications that the COVID-19 pandemic is exacerbating challenges already faced by countries in managing their forests. Without a doubt, the pandemic has been a harsh wake-up call, but we have a unique opportunity in our collective recognition of the solutions that forests hold to many of our global problems, including combating climate change, land degradation, and biodiversity loss, and building resilience against future crises. The Global Forest Goals report gives us a snapshot of the many actions being taken for forests. We must now accelerate these efforts to meet our deadlines of 2030. I hope that this report will serve as inspiration for renewed commitment and action at all levels. I thank you.
I thank the Undersecretary General for Economic and Social Affairs for his statement. I now invite the forum to hear a statement by the Deputy Director General of the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, Ms. Maria Helena Semoda.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. On behalf of the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, I would like to congratulate the United Nations Forum on Forests for the launch of the Global Forest Goals Report 2021, the fruit of tremendous efforts of data collection and analysis, both from countries and UNFF Secretariat. Now, we need to use the valuable knowledge acquired to trigger transformation. The world faces unprecedented challenges, feeding a growing population, conserving our planet's vital ecosystem, tackling climate change, all against the backdrop of COVID-19 pandemic. The international community has set ambitious goals and targets to tackle these challenges, including commitments in the United Nations Strategic Plan for Forests and the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. To meet these commitments, we need to take bold actions to protect, manage, and restore the world's forests and monitor progress. The Food and Agriculture Organization supports countries' efforts to collect, analyze, and use forest data to sustainably manage the world's forests. We are stepping up our work to strengthen national capacities for better and more transparent data, using the latest technology to create engaging outputs and to tailor tools to the needs of countries and strategic partners. Information, knowledge sharing, and working together is vital. The Global Forest Goals Report 2021 is an excellent example of successful collaboration, an analysis based on different sources, including from the FAO Global Forest Resource Assessment 2020. representing 75% of forests in the world. The report builds on national data and information from over 70 voluntary national reports and contributions. These narratives, combined with core quantitative data from the FAO Global Forest Resource Assessment, indicate that despite the many challenges facing countries, progress is being made towards all 6 global forest goals and their associated targets. A series of success stories showcase best practices which can serve to shape decision-making, scale up, and replicate solutions. This report truly illustrated how cooperation can reduce reporting burden and add value. Today, our global forest resource assessment are the most comprehensive review of the world's forest resources. Its data is used to support evidence-based decisions by governments, civil society, and the private sector, to inform international conventions and agendas, as well as to monitor progress towards Sustainable Development Goal 15, Life on Land. We'll continue to make sure that the wealth of information and data on forests produced by FAO are used and complemented by the United Nations Forum on Forests with information on national policies and actions. This is crucial because we don't only want to understand the world, we want to change it to achieve better production, better nutrition, better environment, and a better life for all. Thank you.
I thank the Deputy Director General of the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations for her statement. We shall now turn to the presentation of the key findings of the Global Forest Report 2021. I now invite the Officer in Charge of the United Nations Forum on Forest Secretariat, Mr. Alexander Trepelkov, to present the key findings. Mr. Trepelkov, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for giving me the floor. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the UN Department of Economic and Social Affairs, I am pleased to present the key findings of the inaugural Global Forest Goals Report 2021. 4 years ago, members of the Forum created the first ever UN Strategic Plan for Forests 2030, representing a milestone in the history of the Forum. Until 2017, the focus of the international policy agenda had been primarily on achieving net zero deforestation by reversing and reducing forest loss and forest degradation. Reaching agreement on a higher ambition of increasing global forest area by 3% by 2030 and eradicating extreme poverty for all forest-dependent people was a radical step forward. Following the adoption of the Strategic Plan for Forests by the UN General Assembly, the next challenge was to move from common vision to implementation. Next slide, please. Overall, member states rose to the challenge by strengthening existing legislation and integrating forests into national sustainable development and poverty reduction strategies. Some countries announced new voluntary national contributions towards achieving the global forest goals and targets. Across regions, countries sought to break down silos to mainstream forests across other sectors, such as energy, agriculture, climate change, and environment in general. All of these actions were an indication that real change was happening, to realize a vision of the strategic plan and to meet its goals and targets. As it became evident that implementation was taking place, the question came up how information on those actions would be put together to showcase the progress being made. In response, the Forum, at its 13th session in 2018, requested the UNFF Secretariat to prepare a concise flagship publication. The main purpose was to present in a consolidated format an overview of progress towards achieving the global forest goals using the information from voluntary national reporting. Accordingly, this inaugural report draws upon 52 voluntary national reports and 19 voluntary national contributions, covering 75% of forests in the world. This national informational progress is supplemented with quantitative and biophysical data, primarily from FAO Global Forest Resources Assessment 2020. The launch of the Global Forest Goals Report 2021 is a landmark moment for the Forum, as this is the first DESA flagship publication on this subject. Against this backdrop, I would now like to provide a brief overview of the key findings of the report under each global forest goal. Next slide, please. Countries took a wide range of actions to implement Global Forest Goal 1 on increasing forest cover. To this end, they used existing national forest laws and strategies as their frameworks for action. They built out stakeholder consultations to inform policymaking, and they sought to mainstream forestry considerations across other relevant sectors. Goal implementation was supported by international commitments in sectors other than forestry, such as on climate change, biodiversity, and trade in wildlife. Key findings of the report show that Asia, Europe, Oceania appear to be on track to increase their forest area by 3% between 2015 and 2030, based on the net gains in forest area that were seen in these regions during 2010-2020. On the other hand, Africa and South America experienced loss of forest area, albeit at a slower rate than before. Forest carbon action was integrated into broader climate action, and the world as a whole is on track to maintain its forest carbon stocks. However, carbon stock decreased in Africa and South America due to deforestation. Strengthening forest resilience and adaptive capacity of forests remain an important priority for countries, but there is insufficient data to determine progress towards this target. Next slide, please. Country actions to achieve Global Forest 2 on forest benefits included national forestry strategies, action plans, and programs specifically addressing poverty eradication among forest-dependent people. Also, increased employment opportunities and forest productivity, commodity-based forestry, and capacity building measures. Relevant actions also included programs and activities to benefit forest communities and small forest-based enterprises. Key findings of the report indicate that many actions are being undertaken to reduce poverty for forest-dependent people, but much more remains to effectively measure their effects. Various measures are being taken to support small-scale forest enterprises, but at present, there is no specific indicator to measure progress. A range of actions are being undertaken to increase the contributions of afforestry to food security, but coherent data remains a challenge as these contributions were not included in forest inventories or national statistics. Forest sector employment is still greatly underestimated due to its largely informal nature. Next slide, please. With regard to Global Forest Goal 3 on protecting forests, many countries adopted forest legislation, codes, and policies which had specific provisions addressing protected areas and the promotion of markets for products from sustainably managed forests. They also adopted long-term forest management plans and in 2020, 54% of the world's forests were under long-term management plans. Key findings of the report reveal that by 2020, nearly 18% of forests were legally protected. Most regions were on track to significantly increase the area of protected forests. Africa, Asia, and South America had already exceeded Aichi biodiversity target 11. Most regions were on track to significantly increase or maintain the area of forests under long-term management plans. The area of certified forest expanded, as did the supply of wood from certified and other sustainably managed forests. Next slide, please. As for Global Forest Goal 4 on forest financing, technical cooperation and partnerships, country actions included implementation of financing strategies for sustainable forest management, promotion of cooperation and partnerships across all levels of governance, and international cooperation as a way to foster innovation and partnerships. Key findings of the report show that most countries were able to mobilize increased financial resources for sustainable forest management through adoption and implementation of forest financing strategies and international cooperation. Numerous initiatives to increase forest financing were launched, indicating progress. However, assessing the full scale of global forest financing remains quite difficult. Initiatives for generating and disseminating technical and scientific information to strengthen sustainable forest management were reported. However, much more such action was needed. Despite these efforts, financing for forests remains well below the level needed to achieve GFGs, especially in developing countries. Almost all developing countries identified lack of resources, especially finance, as a major obstacle to reaching GFG1. And more than 25% of developing countries reported that inadequate funding hindered their progress towards Global Forest Goal 2. The UNFF's Global Forest Financing Facilitation Network has been working to address these challenges of access to forest finance by assisting countries in development of national forest financing strategies and by providing technical assistance in the preparation of project proposals. But again, more work is needed in this area. Next slide, please. Actions taken to achieve Global Forest Goal 5 on forest governance included improved cross-sectoral coordination and collaboration, expanded stakeholder engagement in policy formulation and implementation, integrating forest management into national land use planning processes, and monitoring wood flows to keep illegal timber and forest products out of markets. Key findings of the report demonstrate that forests were integrated into national sustainable development plans or poverty reduction strategies. Many complementary but varied measures were taken to significantly strengthen national and subnational forest authorities and to combat illegal logging and related trade. A wide range of measures were taken to improve policy coherence and to involve stakeholders, local communities, and indigenous peoples in policymaking processes. Most countries had land use planning systems in place that integrated forest issues. Next slide, please. The collaborative partnership on forests helped advance progress towards GFG 6 on cooperation, coordination, and coherence. Achieving forest policy coherence at the international level largely depends, however, on the guidance and resources provided by the governing bodies of the UN entities and other CPF member organizations. Key findings of the report disclose that the UN system put in place a range of general coordination measures applicable to forest-related programs. The CPF was instrumental in developing programs for joint action and served as a coordination mechanism for implementation. The partnership worked to improve the coherence, complementarity, and comprehensive coverage of international forest-related programs. However, further analysis is needed to assess progress in this regard. Action was taken at the national and international levels to enhance cross-sectoral coordination to promote sustainable forest management. There was an array of communication initiatives, including on open access to data on forest operations, standards for plantations, emissions trading schemes for forestry, and forest funding. Forest activities are being planned in close collaboration with major groups and other relevant stakeholders. Next slide, please. The Global Forest Goals Report 2021 paint a vibrant picture of ambitious and inspiring action on the ground and around the world. These narratives, combined with the quality data of the FAO Global Forest Resources Assessment 2020, indicate that despite the many challenges that countries face, progress is being made towards all 6 global forest goals and their associated targets. National informational progress towards the global forest goals will continue to be critical for timely and informed decision-making, to inspire renewed ambition to care for the world's forests and people who depend on them. As the world is reeling from the devastating impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic, we are experiencing escalating impacts of climate change and biodiversity loss. For each of these global challenges, forests and forest-dependent people are both a casualty and an important part of the solution. There are growing concerns that the global recession, especially in donor countries, could eventually lead to reduced international public financing for forests. At the regional level, we are already seeing challenges for forest financing in Africa, the Asia-Pacific region, and for some countries in Latin America, where limited public resources are being spent on the most immediate public health needs. For the forest community, the centrality of forests to global well-being is self-evident. And now, above all, this vital role of forests must be promoted with greater commitment and collaborative action. Next slide, please. In closing, I would like to acknowledge key partners and individuals without whom this report would not have been possible. I wish to thank member states who submitted their voluntary national reports and voluntary national contributions. I wish to thank FAO Forestry Division for the biophysical global data from the Global Forest Resources Assessment 2020 and their substantive contributions to the draft report. I want to thank members of the informal advisory group, some of whom are being also part of today's event, including, of course, our chair. I want to thank governments of Australia and Slovakia for their generous financial contributions in support of production of this report. Last but not least, I want to thank the team of UNFF Secretariat staff and consultants led by Ms. Afsa Kimitali-Rothschild, who worked tirelessly to put together this report. This concludes my presentation, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much. Over to you.
I thank the officer in charge of the United Nations Forum on Forests Secretariat for his informative presentation. I now invite the forum to hold its panel discussion on the launch of the Global Forest Goals Report 2021, and I am pleased to welcome our distinguished panelists. Firstly, Ms. Liu Xin, Deputy Director General of the National Forestry and Grassland Administration of China. Mr. Julius Kamau, Chief Conservator of Forests in Kenya. Ms. Maureen Whelan, Manager of International Affairs at the Canadian Forest Service. Ms. Davia Kati, Manager of Strategic Corporate Planning in the Forestry Department of Jamaica. Mr. Boris Graguska, Chief State Councillor of the Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development of Slovakia, and Ms. Mete Vilke, Director of the Forestry Division at the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. We will first hear a statement from Ms. Liu Xin, Deputy Director General of the National Forestry and Grassland Administration of China.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At the outset, I congratulate UNFF Secretariat on the official launch of its flagship publication, Global Forest Goals 2021. I thank you for inviting China to share its experiences in forest development and national reporting. Let me start by elaborating on measures taken by China to reverse the loss of forest cover. China has been committed to land greening and afforestation to increase forest resources. Our forest cover rate has registered huge growth from under 9% shortly after the founding of the People's Republic of China in 1949 to 12% at the start of reform and open up in the 1980s, and then to 23.04% as it currently stands. Over the past 4 decades, our forest area increased by 105 million hectares, while our forest stock volume exceeded 7.5 billion cubic meters. In contrast to the continuous decrease of global forest resources, our forest cover and stock volume have both kept growing for over 3 decades, making China the country with the highest growth of forest resources worldwide. According to NASA research released in February 2019, 1/4 of the increase of the Earth's green area came from China, of which 42% shall be credited to our afforestation and reforestation efforts. Behind every slight increase is the hard work of the Chinese people. China's remarkable achievements are a result of the priority attention given by the government to ecological development. Bearing in mind that lucid waters and lush mountains are invaluable assets, China has taken numerous measures on forest protection and restoration to improve ecological environment and people's health and livelihood. First, China has implemented major ecological restoration programs over the past 4 decades. We have built a large-scale shelter belt forest system in northwestern, northeastern, and North China, where there is severe sandstorm and soil erosion. On that basis, we have then carried out similar programs in the Yangtze River Basin, protecting natural forest and converting cultivated land with severe soil erosion into forests and grasslands. These efforts have enabled the rapid recovery of forest and grass cover and significant environmental improvement. Second, we have conducted large-scale land greening programs. Each year, our afforestation and forest tending area reach over 6.6 million hectares. We have launched a voluntary tree planting campaign which enjoys wide participation. All Chinese citizens, from state leaders to the general public, take annual tree planting as an obligation. This not only helps green the earth, but also helps shape the green mentality and raise public awareness on ecological conservation. Third, we have worked tirelessly to improve the quality of forests. Implementing targeted measures for forest quality improvement has promoted comprehensive and sustainable forest management. Over the past decade, China's forest stock volume increased by 20%. Forest cities, forest towns, and forest villages have come into being, thus improving urban and rural environment and gradually bringing us eco-friendly space with beautiful landscape. Furthermore, China has allocated huge amount of funds for forestry development. In the past 5 years, financial support from central government alone was more than 97 billion US dollars. Government measures are effectively integrated into efforts for livelihood improvement and poverty eradication. Therefore, local people are motivated to participate. China's forest goals are highly consistent with the global forest goals. We aim to achieve by 2025 national forest cover of 24.1% and by 2030 increase the forest volume by 6 billion cubic meters over the 2005 level. Therefore, China will integrate land greening into land restoration plan and the master plan on the protection and restoration of key ecosystems. We will promote integrated protection, systematic restoration, and comprehensive management of mountain, river, lake, forest, farmland, grassland, and desert ecosystems, and further improve the quality and quantity of forest resources. We will explore the potentials of forests on carbon sequestration and strive to keep pre-2030 carbon emission as peak and achieve carbon neutrality by 2060. Now I'd like to share with you our experiences in national reporting. The National Forestry and Grassland Administration of China, as the implementing body of UNFI in China, has attached great importance to UNSPF, integrated UNSPF goals into our forestry plans, and strived to achieve the global forest goals through forest resources management, ecological conservation and restoration, forestry development, and so on. We have set up 15 centers of excellence to showcase best practice in such fields as forest management, protection and restoration of degraded forest land, under forest economy, forest therapy, and nature education. An example of such centers is Seihanba Mechanical Forest Farm, which was awarded Champions of the Earth by UNEP in 2017. It was also a success story mentioned in our national report. In preparing the national report, we took the following measures. 1. National reporting was seen as a major task in implementing UNFI, therefore earmarked funding was allocated. 2. An expert group was set up for this purpose, gathering specialists in forest management and ecological and socio-economic development. The expert group was in charge of compiling information, drafting and preparing the report. 3. We coordinated with all stakeholders to collect data and carry out case studies, and jointly reviewed and completed our report. In addition, this work also benefits from our unified and standardized statistic index system and the relatively complete whole process forestry statistics management system. China's Forestry Statistics Yearbook and Forestry Development Report, issued by NFGA every year, are important reference sources in preparing our report. This concludes my sharing of China's experiences on the 2 points. I hope that we could step up cooperation with all member states and international organizations with a view to promoting the work of UNFF. Thank you.
I thank the Director General of the National Forestry and Grassland Administration of China for her statement. We will now hear a statement by Mr. Julius Kamau, Chief Conservator of Forests in Kenya.
The presiding chair of the launch event and who is the vice chair of the UNFF 16, Mr. Jesse Mahoney, eminent delegates from UNFF member states, colleagues, panelists, members of CPF, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I am Julius Kamau, the Chief Conservator of Forests, Kenya Forest Service, and the national focal point for the Kenya 2 United Nations Forum on Forests. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, it will give me great pleasure to sit in this panel as we launch the Global Forest Goals Report 2021 as part of the opening of the 16th session of UNFF and to lead in the discussion on Global Forest Goal number 2, whose focus is on improving the livelihoods of forest-dependent people, and in our case, forest-adjacent community. I will also provide a synopsis of the experiences of Kenya in the preparation and submission of the Voluntary National Report, VNR. Kenya has taken several actions towards the improvement of livelihood of forest-dependent people. 1, the Forest Conservation and Management Act 2016 recognizes the participation of forest-adjacent communities in protection, conservation, and management of forests through participatory forest management framework. Forest-dependent communities, and in our case, forest-adjacent communities, are allowed to form community forest associations, and they are registered with the societies under the Societies Act. The government, together with the CFAs, jointly prepare participatory forest management plans for public forests. The community forest associations are assigned user rights through legally binding forest management agreement, which allow them to engage in livelihood support activities, among them nature-based enterprises, ecotourism, and contractual implementation of cultural activities, which improves food security and income generation. The formation of charcoal producer associations, tree grower associations, and field schools in forestry for community awareness, mobilization, and creation of value chain for forest product is another action that Kenya has undertaken. The other action is the establishment of the Forest Investment Facility, which provide capacity development for farmers and provision of revolving loans for small-scale forest enterprises and livelihood investments. We also have been able to prepare the Community Forestation Development and Financing Cycle framework to support funding by the partners for projects initiated by the forest-dependent people. Finally, we have also been able to, as a country, to develop and utilize the human rights-based approach to forest protection and management. Chair, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to present the second segment of my presentation on the synopsis of the experiences of Kenya in the preparation and submission of the Voluntary National Report, starting with the production process of the National Report for Kenya. Kenya has adopted a consultative process for the preparation of its voluntary national reports. The first report was submitted during the 2017 piloting stage for the reporting format, which was developed by the forum. In 2019, Kenya was supported by the UNFF in the preparation of its report, which was submitted in November 2019. As part of the preparation of the 2019 report, two international workshops were conducted, one for the agencies of the Ministry of Environment and Forestry, where Kenya Forest Service sits, and one for the wider audience of government, public benefit organizations, and the private sector. Chair, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to share with you and with the forum Kenyan experiences on stakeholder participation in the preparation of the report. The core team which worked on the report was made up of the National Focal Point, Ministry of Environment and Forestry, and the county governments. It was necessary to reach out to professionals working in the field of climate change, focal point for forest resource assessment. Important information was accessed from websites and published reports. Kenya uses the following processes for data collection for purposes of national planning. 1, economic surveys conducted every 1 year, integrated household survey every 5 years, demographic and health survey every 5 years, population and housing census every 10 years, and occasional surveys for targeted programs. It is important to note that Kenya experienced some challenges in collection of the socioeconomic data on forests. In fact, collecting forest-specific socioeconomic data at the national level is very expensive, and current data collection surveys do not comprehensively cover aspects on forest. Protocol for collection of socioeconomic data on forest, including identification of key parameters, is yet to be agreed upon by the stakeholders. It is good for me to share with the forum the importance of voluntary national reporting for Kenya. And I'll start by saying that the information consolidated through the report can also assist in the preparation of the National Forest Status Report every 2 years and Forest Resource Assessment Report for every 5 years, as provided for in our Forest Conservation and Management Act 2016. It is also a good reference document and also a good yardstick on the extent of implementation of the UN Strategic Plan for Forest 2017-2030. The process of preparing the report creates synergy in the preparation of other national reports, such as communication to UNFCCC, CBD reporting, and AFR 100. During the preparation of the voluntary national report, Kenya learned the following lessons, which I'm happy to share with the forum. 1, we recognize that wide consultation among diverse stakeholders is required for national reporting, as forestry is very much interlinked to the many other sectors and players. National reporting has created more awareness on the UN Strategic Plan for Forest and the UN Forest Instrument among stakeholders. And national knowledge management platform on forest is needed to support information, data banking, update, and sharing. Finally, reasonable amount of time is required for proper consultation, synthesis, and computation of the national report. As I conclude, it has been a good experience for Kenya to prepare and submit the voluntary national reports during the 2 reporting cycles. I encourage all members of the forum to strive to prepare and submit their reports as part of our collective responsibility on implementation of the UN Strategic Plan for Forest and accumulation of data, information on forest, and sharing. Please accept the assurances of my highest consideration. Stay safe, and thank you.
I thank the Chief Conservator of Forests for Kenya for his statement. I now invite the Manager of International Affairs at the Canadian Forest Service, Ms. Maureen Whelan, to make a statement. Ms. Whelan, you have the floor.
Mr. Chair, and I just need to share my screen. I'm wondering, can the Secretariat actually, they have a copy. I'm just wondering if they could run it from there.
Secretariat, would that be possible to show Maureen's presentation, please?
Okay, while we're waiting for that, I will just start with Canada has been asked to present on the implementation of GFG3 in our context. And next slide, please. And this is the goal that we're reporting on. And next slide, please. So you'll see Canada has approximately 347 million hectares of forest land. 93% of this is public land. So it makes our forest management very, the reporting is much easier because it's public. You'll see it's managed versus unmanaged forest. I'm sorry if you could just go back, Yan. Thank you. It's speeding ahead of me. The area of forest harvested each year is less than half of 1% of our 347 million hectares of forest. And we have much more area affected by fires and insects. In 2018, at least 427 million seedlings were planted on 350,000 hectares of provincial forest lands, and an additional 6,000 hectares of forests were seeded. You can see our forest area has been very stable and decreasing by less than half of 1% in the last 25 years. In terms of protected areas, you'll see that our national conserved areas proportion of area has increased. This is target 3.1. The area of forest worldwide designated as protected areas are conserved through other effective area-based conservation measures. And at the end of 2019, we had 12.1% of our terrestrial area, land and freshwater, conserved, including 11.4% in protected areas. And to address the concurrent biodiversity, climate, and health crisis, established and growing scientific peer-reviewed research is showing that more of the planet must be kept in a natural state, with the range between 30% and 80%. Experts agree that conserving at least 30% of global terrestrial and marine areas is needed by 2030, the 30 by 30 initiative, to address these crises. Accordingly, the Government of Canada now has a mandate to conserve 25% of Canada's lands and oceans by 2025, working toward 30% of each by 2030. Next, please. This is just a slide to show that the increase of forest within those protected areas, the numbers continue to climb as well. The next slide, please. Target 3.2, the areas of forest under long-term forest management plans, is significantly increased. Of our 347 million hectares of forest land, more than 200 million hectares are managed with a long-term management plan of 10 years or longer. This is an increase of 8% since 1990. And this is a 10-year map. I apologize for its poor quality, but you'll see there's a mixture of different tenure types. And they go from Indigenous lands to provincial to federal, and they all have their unique situations in terms of management planning. The next slide, please. Target 3.3, the proportion of forest products from sustainably managed forests is significantly increased. So this map demonstrates the area of forest certified under the 3 forest certification systems recognized in Canada. As Canada already has rigorous forest management regulation and policies in place, certification acts as an extra layer of assurance that products coming from Canada have been harvested sustainably. And Canada leads the world in area of forests that have been certified to one of these systems with 164 million hectares. Next slide, please. We were asked to talk about reporting on forests and its value to this exercise. So some of the reporting mechanisms we use is our primary one is the National Forest Inventory. And that's a collaborative effort involving federal, provincial, and territorial government agencies. The NFI monitors a network of 20,000 sampling points across Canada on an ongoing basis to provide information on the state of Canada's forests and a continuous record of forest change. They provide data and products to forest science researchers, forest policy decision makers, and interested stakeholders. Plots are measured on a 10-year cycle, with approximately 1/10 of our plots measured each year. NFI produces statistical summaries and other information products on a regular basis. And of course, we're seeing increasing use of tools such as LiDAR, and that is increasing our monitoring and reporting capacity. And the next slide, please. So in terms of the value of reporting, in Canada, it's an act of Parliament actually requires us to report every year on the state of Canada's forests. And we value the opportunity to report through to the UNFF through the monitoring and reporting process, a really good way to contribute to a robust global picture of the contribution of forests to global commitments. And we have really appreciated our opportunity to present through this panel. Thank you very much.
I thank the Manager of International Affairs at the Canadian Forest Service for her statement. We will now hear a statement from Ms. Davia Kati, Manager of Strategic Corporate Planning in the Forestry Department of Jamaica.
Jamaica's experience reporting to UNFF and our progress towards Global Forest Goal 4. My name is Davia Carty, and I'm the Senior Director for Strategic and Corporate Planning at the Forestry Department in Jamaica, and it is my pleasure to take you through this presentation today. Approximately 40%, or 439,000 hectares of Jamaica is forested, and of that amount, the agency manages approximately 117,000 hectares, with the remainder falling in private hands. The Forestry Department is the lead agency with responsibility for the island's forest resources. The country has had experience with voluntary reporting to the UNFF since UNFF 11. National reports are produced using a consultative process led by the agency involving national stakeholders. The agency, over a 4-month period, organizes consultations to facilitate data gathering. Some key stakeholders engaged during this process include several government entities, non-government entities, academia, and our community-based organizations. Overall, for the UNFF 15 report, there was an increased understanding of the monitoring and reporting process, as well as increased capacity to collect data, which assisted greatly in the development of the report and reduced difficulties in obtaining relevant information. The agency has identified several benefits of national reporting. It provides the country the opportunity to participate in national reporting on the international scene. Reporting templates and guidance offer significant clarity and ease to facilitate the reporting. National reports provide a useful pool of information for the forest sector as well as its key stakeholders, and it helps to gauge progress towards achievement of national and international goals and commitments. In looking at our progress towards Global Forest Goal 4, in 2018, the country received financial and technical support to develop financing strategies to achieve SFM. A situational analysis on the current status of SFM and the forest financing landscape was completed, identifying gaps and making recommendations. By late 2018, several workshops were held using this information to build capacity to access financing for implementation of SFM in Jamaica. By 2019, a financing strategy and action plan for the forest sector was developed. Support was then provided through the FAO for development for submission of a 4-year project. The project, valued at US $10 million if approved, will see significant mobilization of resources towards SFM. 4-year budget support program for the forest sector to further finance key activities for SFM was negotiated with the country and the EU and has mobilized approximately US $19 million for SFM. Public international funding, including official development assistance, partnerships with international development partners, as well as several technical cooperation programs, have assisted the agency in recent years in mobilizing significantly increased financial and technical resources for SFM. Our challenges remain that budget allocation for the forest sector is limited and direct access to funding is a challenge. Getting funds earmarked specifically for the forest sector and SFM needs greater capacity in the sector to source, administer, and implement. Competition for scarce resources also remains a challenge among government entities. Our recommendations within our 10-year plan for the forest sector identified as priority the need to increase technical and financial resources. We continue to seek support to build capacity for mobilizing financial resources and strengthen scientific and technical cooperation. In doing so, as an agency, we strive to meet our goal to manage and conserve the forest ecosystems of Jamaica for the benefit of present and future generations. Thank you.
I thank the Manager of Strategic Corporate Planning in the Forestry Department of Jamaica for her statement. We will now hear a statement by Mr. Boris Greguska, Chief State Councillor at the Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development of Slovakia.
Dear Mr. Moderator, distinguished delegates, first of all, I wish to thank you for the opportunity to address the 16th session of the UN Forum on Forests, a very special event launching the Global Forest Goals Report 2021. I also wish to congratulate to all those involved in this process, leading to a first flagship publication produced by the UNFF Secretariat. I am glad that I can briefly share some of the experiences and lessons learned in reporting on the progress towards the Global Forest Goals, specifically as regards the Global Forest Goal 5 on promoting governance frameworks to implement sustainable forest management. As you know, the GFG 5, similarly like GFG 6, is to a large extent about the integration, about coordination and cross-sectoral cooperation, about synergies, coherence, complementarities, and consistency. In my intervention, let me distinguish between two principal things, the implementation of the GFG 5 and the reporting on the implementation of the GFG 5. As regards the implementation of the GFG 5, in majority of European countries, including Slovakia, the basic tool for providing conditions to ensure the cross-sectoral coordination and coherence on forest issues is the National Forest Programme, NFP. And it was a Forest Europe, a regional high-level political process on forests that has developed a pan-European approach to national forest programs that is implemented throughout European countries. In Slovakia, it means that cross-sectoral cooperation and participation of stakeholders in forest policy development, decision-making and implementation is ensured through the NFP process. And this is the case also now when a new NFP 2030 is being developed with the involvement of stakeholders. In addition, we have and apply the general law in Slovakia that sets obligations, modalities for public authorities to involve stakeholders to administrative procedures in cases when the rights, legitimate interests or duties of stakeholders are affected. So this is the general obligation resulting from our national law. As regards the reporting on the implementation of the GFG 5, when we monitor and report on progress towards the global forest goals, including the GFG 5, it is therefore essential to cooperate and get relevant information from national and subnational authorities involved in the implementation of the NFP. In other words, all relevant data and information reported on the implementation of actions taken and progress achieved should be based on more sources. Inclusion of a number of institutions and actors is desirable and needed. In the Slovakian case, one of the main challenges in gathering data and information was and still remains to get into proper intersectoral dialogue that would facilitate the common understanding amongst relevant sectors and institutions on how successfully or less successfully certain actions and measures have been implemented. I want to say that there may be, and in fact there are, different perspectives of different sectors and actors on progress made or not made in certain fields of action. In Slovakia, this is specifically relevant for cooperation between official authorities, the forestry sector, and in the nature conservation sector. So it's room for improvement in cooperation for the future. Therefore, I want to say that such basic principles of the NFP process as partnership approach and raising awareness are also relevant for the monitoring and reporting process itself. And I must say that there is still a challenge to utilize partnerships in a maximum possible extent to increase the effectiveness of reporting process. I specifically mean partnerships with institutions responsible for the national implementation of the 2030 Agenda, the Rio Conventions, and other international and European Union's instruments, such as the European Green Deal. From a regional perspective, it has to be stressed that Slovakia, as other European countries, reports on NFP to the forestry process. In this context, synergies between regional and global reporting processes and databases have to be further strengthened wherever possible. To conclude, awareness of public and sectors outside the forest sector on forest goals and benefits of SFM is insufficient. I believe that the first flagship publication can be a game changer in this regard. I thank you.
I thank the Chief State Councillor from Slovakia for his statement. I now invite the Director of the Forestry Division at the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, Ms. Mette Wilke, to make a statement. Ms. Wilke, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Moderator, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to share my screen first, so let me just give me a second here. Find the right one. It's a great pleasure to be able to be here and speak with you today on the occasion of the launch of the Global Forest Goals Report 2021. I've been asked to talk about the importance of enhanced cooperation, coordination, and data for monitoring progress towards international forest-related commitments. But before I do so, I should just like to congratulate the UNFF Secretariat for putting this report together. As someone who has coordinated 2 of FAO's Global Forest Resources Assessments in the past, and 1 of the State of the World's Forest Report, I know how much work goes into preparing such major reports. And I think the examples of the new policies and other actions undertaken by countries that have reported to UNFF are inspirational, and I sincerely hope they will encourage many more countries to follow suit. As we've heard, the quantitative indicators in the report are taken from FAO's most recent Global Forest Resources Assessment, also known as FRA 2020. They show that the outcomes of action taken over the past many years have helped us make progress towards all the 6 global forest goals. And you will hear more of the results of the Global Forest Resource Assessment 2020 in a plenary session on Wednesday. So I won't go into details here. But as I'm sure you all know, one of the headlines from that assessment is that the forest loss is slowing down, but not nearly fast enough to meet the international forest-related commitments. So we need to step up actions, and I'm sure that the results and the examples in the Global Forest Goals Report 2021 will help spur such action. Here's a list of just a few of those commitments, and in addition to the United Nations Forest Instrument and the 6 Global Forest Goals, there are a number of international conventions which have commitments related to forest. And as you know, there are 2 specific targets under the Sustainable Development Goals, but many more that forests make a significant contribution to. This, of course, means that there is a tremendous reporting burden on countries. And since 1945, when FAO was established, it has been supporting countries' efforts to collect, analyze, and use forest-related data to sustainably manage the world's forests. The results of the very first assessment were published back in 1948. But since then, the requirements for information has spiraled. And this is why FAO has been working closely together with international conventions, the UNFF Secretariat, and other members of the Collaborative Partnership on Forest to streamline forest-related reporting. And to this end, a global core set of forest-related indicators has been developed, and you'll hear more about progress on those in another specific plenary session on Wednesday. In addition to agreeing on which indicators to use and how to define and measure them, FAO has gone one step further and has developed a collaborative forest resources questionnaire together with a number of other reporting processes. And thanks to this partnership and the development of an online platform, the data collection and validation process is now done jointly, which allows for additional regional or specific data to be incorporated into the reporting process for the Global Forest Resources Assessment. This was already done for the preparation of the State of Europe's Forest 2020 report. And all those data collected are now available through this open access platform hosted by FAO. We continue to also publish the key findings, the main report, and all the country reports. And this time we added an interactive digital report as well. We also help enhance the capacity to meet new reporting requirements and have recently developed 2 e-learning courses to allow those interested to learn more about the SDG indicators and how to report on forest and meeting the requirements under the enhanced transparency framework under the UNFCCC. Both of these are available in English, French, and Spanish, and the latter is also available in Chinese. Before I end, let me just allow me to thank the more than 700 national and international experts that were involved in FRA 2000 and providing data to the Global Forest Resource Assessment 2020. It's thanks to them that we now have a specific report analyzing progress towards the Global Forest Goals based on official data provided by countries and reviewed by FAO and its partners. I understand from a colleague that my presentation may or may not have been moved on the screen. If not, I certainly apologize. It's very difficult to use this new platform, but thank you very much for your patience.
I thank the Director of the Forestry Division of FAO for her statement. Distinguished delegates, we have now come to the end of the launch, and I would like to take this opportunity to share a few final thoughts about the flagship publication. The Strategic Plan for Forests set an ambitious vision for our forests to be met by 2030. However, it is now up to us to communicate and demonstrate how we are making progress towards achieving its 6 global forest goals and the 26 associated targets. It was for this reason that the Forum asked the UNFF Secretariat to produce a credible, representative, concise, and compelling flagship publication. think we can all agree, once you've had a chance to read it, that that is what has occurred. It's quite a very good publication, and I encourage you all to read it. However, the release of this report is extremely timely, as it comes at a moment when governments and international organisations are raising the alarm that hard-won progress made in forests and for sustainable development as a whole run the risk of being set back. We in the forestry community cannot allow this to happen. As the Secretary-General eloquently pointed out in his foreword, forests have been a lifeline during the current pandemic. For the millions of people who have turned to them for their most essential subsistence needs. We know that in times of crisis, when economic and social safety nets are weakened or failing, forests are where marginalised and vulnerable communities turn to in order to survive. Reports like this flagship publication can serve as an important advocacy and communication tool, not just to remind the external audiences in the broader development community of why forests matter and what they can offer when they're well taken care of, but also for our internal audiences and leaders in our respective organisations. It has been a long process to get to this point, and it is now up to us to decide how we proceed further. It is also up to us to turn this flagship publication into an effective tool for communicating the policy relevance, policy drivers, and perhaps most importantly, the policy gaps which exist in the context of sustainably managing the world's forests. As the report was only launched today, we realised that most of you have not yet had the opportunity to read through it. I encourage you to read both the full publication and its shorter overview of progress version. It contains a wealth of information, and we hope that reading about the myriad of actions and initiatives will serve as an inspiration for greater commitment and greater priority being given to our forests. As an IAG member, I got to see firsthand the challenge of taking the range of information contained in national reports and turning it into clear and coherent narrative. Analysing and editing the report was a mammoth task, and I would like to commend the UNFF Secretariat team of staff and consultants for a job well done. This report benefited greatly from FRA 2020 data to provide biophysical data and quantitative figures. But the heart of the report is in the narratives, the stories that emerged from UNFF national reports and voluntary national contributions. My personal favourite were the success stories that are featured throughout the report and the wonderful photographs that are associated with those stories. Recognising that some of the countries that submitted voluntary national reports may have factual corrections that they may wish to see reflected in the report, the Bureau has recommended that such input be sent to the UNFF Secretariat within 3 weeks of today, that is by the 17th of May 2021. This will allow you to make minor factual corrections to the report, nothing major. With this, I'd like to close agenda item 3G for today, and to note that this is not the end of our consideration of this agenda item. We will continue substantive discussions on monitoring, assessment and reporting during the second meeting on Wednesday. And I look forward to receiving your comments and feedback on the report during that meeting. In the interest of time, we will now move on to the next agenda item. I now invite the officer in charge of the United Nations Forum on Forest Secretariat, Mr. Alexander Trepelkov, to introduce the documentation under the various agenda items of this session. Mr. Trepelkov, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I have the honor to introduce 5 notes by the Secretariat submitted under agenda items 3, 4, and 6 of this session of UNFF. First, The note by the Secretariat on adoption of the forum's program of work for the period 2022-2024, document E/CN.18/2021/2, provides an overview of the progress and challenges in the implementation of the thematic priorities of the forum for the biennium 2021-2022, namely Global Forest Goal 1 and 2 as substantive goals, along with GFGs 4, 5, and 6 as cross-cutting goals. The note includes an update on the newly announced voluntary national contributions by UNFF members to advance the implementation of the UN Strategic Plan for Forests, as well as a progress report by some countries on their previously announced VNCs. The note outlines activities during the International Day of Forests and communication and outreach strategies. It also provides background information on the program of work of the forum for 2022-2024, which was already agreed through informal silence procedure. In assessing progress towards the thematic priorities of UNFF 16, the note states that transformations towards meeting the GFGs and their targets by 2030 is not yet advancing at the scale and speed required. The impact of the COVID-19 pandemic could imperil the gains achieved through the goals. At the same time, the current crisis offers an unprecedented opportunity to integrate forest-based actions in various response and recovery measures to reduce the risk of future pandemics and accelerate the attainment of the UNFF 16 thematic priorities. The forthcoming launch of the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration 2021-2030, this year's session of HLPF, CBD COP15, UNFCCC COP26, and the World Forestry Congress in 2022 all provide important opportunities for member states, the UN system, and stakeholders to enhance synergies with forest-related goals and targets. The note suggests that members of the forum mainstream and escalate forest-related actions into their national development programs and build joint initiatives and partnerships to accelerate achievement of UNFF 16 thematic priorities. It also encourages integration of forest-based actions into the nationally determined contributions to the Paris Agreement and into the post-2020 global biodiversity framework. Second, the note by the Secretariat entitled "The Implementation of the UN Strategic Plan for Forests, Contributions and Enhanced Cooperation with Partners towards achieving the thematic priorities of the 16th and 17th sessions of the forum," document E/CN.18/2021/3, provides an update on the intersessional activities undertaken by CPF member organizations, regional and sub-regional partners, and major groups of various stakeholders in support of the implementation of UN SPF and achievement of the UNFF 16 thematic priorities. The note also highlights relevant activities of the Secretariat in collaborating with these partners, as well as its efforts to enhance participation of representatives from the private sector, industry, and philanthropic organizations in the work of the forum. Recognizing the value of these efforts, the note states that there is room for these partners to increase their support to the work of the forum and engage in additional activities to advance implementation of the GFGs. In this respect, the note emphasizes that integration of the GFGs in the operational programs of CFF member organizations and the provision of focused input by the partnership to the thematic priorities of the forum are important steps for maximizing complementarities, synergies, and coherence among policies and programs of CPF member organizations. The forum will take up these and other suggestions from the note at its meeting tomorrow. Number 3, the note by the Secretariat entitled Means of Implementation, including operations and resources of the Global Forest Financing Facilitation Network, document E/CN.18/2021/4, provides a brief overview of the recent global developments, including the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on forest financing. The note describes the support by the Global Forest Financing Facilitation Network, GFFN, to eligible countries in mobilizing financial resources from all sources for sustainable forest management. It includes an update on phase 1 of the GFFN clearinghouse, as well as latest developments with regard to the proposed UNFF Secretariat Office for the GFFN in Beijing, China. The note emphasizes that addressing the challenge of forest financing requires collaborative, long-term, and consistent efforts by all key players at all levels. The lack of access to information on funding opportunities adds to the complexity of the situation. The GFFN and its clearinghouse have an important role to play in assisting countries in this regard. Welcoming the contributions made thus far by donor countries to the work of the GFFN, the note states that predictable resources and constant review of the work of the network are required to increase the network's efficiency and its support to countries during the quadrennial program work for the period 2021-2024 and beyond. The note contains some suggestions for discussion of the forum, including organization of an intersessional workshop